Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee on the 19th of June 2024. I am Phil Barnett, the Chairman of Western Area Planning Committee, and I'm assisted tonight by a variety of members and officers. Firstly, the members, my Vice Chairman, Clive Hooker, also Anthony Amaraj, okay. Councillor Paul Dick, Councillor Nigel Foote, Councillor Denise Gaines, Councillor Tony Vickers and Councillor Howard Williston. The following officers are also attending to advise and support this meeting. Firstly, to my right, Development Manager Bob Dray. In the rear, Principal Planning Officer Jake Brown. Next door to Jake, there's also Cheyenne Kirby, Principal Planning Officer. To my left, the solicitor, Beth Varco. Gareth Dowding, the Principal Highways Engineer, I think was joining on Zoom. I don't know whether he is already joining or whether he's joining later on.
But we believe Gareth is on Zoom.
Yes, okay. Also, who's just spoken, Ben Ryan, the clerk, and to my rear, Sam Childerton, who's the Zoom host. Before we start this evening's meeting, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including impartiality and respect. Members across the chamber might not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in any disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful of other people's views. Tonight, if we hear the evacuation alarm, okay, sorry. If we hear the evacuation alarm, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via a safe emergency exit route and follow any instruction given by the officers. The assembly point in the car park of the Dolphin Pub, which is at the rear of this building, or at least near the entrance to the building. If there is a lockdown alarm which sounds, we must remain seated and await further instructions from the officers. We will then adjourn the meeting until such a time as it is safe to proceed. Members, do you have any questions about the way we're going to proceed with the meeting before we formally proceed with proceedings? Okay, shaking heads, fair enough. Okay, firstly, have we got any apologies at all this evening?
No apologies have been received, Chairman.
Well, I've received an apology, but it was probably unofficial. It was from Councillor Adrian Abbs, but that was several days ago. And I was led to believe he was going to notify someone in the department if he actually was unable to attend formally, but we've heard nothing since.
That's fine, we can note it.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, we move on to sets of minutes, and you've got 3 sets tonight. So firstly, I'm going to ask members to consider a set of minutes which refer to the meeting that was held on the 20th of March. Any comments, members? Well, I've got a comment from the chair, and it obviously proves that I do sometimes read minutes. I wouldn't necessarily say I read them in depth, but minute 73, which applies to me making statements about the site up near the the application which referred to the site at the back of the college. I did make a reference to the retail park and reference to the proposed retail store on the site, and reading through it, it doesn't quite make it clear to me. I think I would like to have it amended where it says Councillor Barnett stated that he had initially had concerns with the retail store, considering the nearby stores in the retail park and the stores in the retail park bit's been missed. So I'd like to have that included if other members feel that's appropriate. And then, of course, it would move on to saying, however, with the location of this retail store, more local residents will be able to travel to the store without the need of a car. So I think it sounds a little bit better the way I said it. Is that an agreement around the table? Okay. With that amendment, can I have a formal proposal, please? For members that are present? Okay. Seconded. Sorry, I think Councillor Williston proposed and Councillor Vickers seconded. All those in favour? And obviously, Councillor Dick, were you not present?
I wasn't on the panel at that
No,
time, so I'm
Councillor
And I
Foot.
wasn't on the panel at that point either, Chair.
Okay. And Councillor Curtis, I can't remember whether you put your hand up or not, Councillor Hooker. Councillor Hooker, did you vote? Sorry, you did. Okay, sorry. Okay. Moving on then to the second set of minutes, which refer to the meeting held on the 24th of April. Again, any comments on the minutes? No. So can I have a proposal? Councillor Dick, seconded. Councillor Amaraj, okay. All those in favour? And presumably you weren't present and Councillor Foot not present. Okay, thank you very much. And then the formality, of course, is the annual meeting where we agreed members of this committee. And I presume it's straightforward, and I'm going to propose it from the chair, seconded, vice chairman. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Do you want me to sign these now? Okay. Right, if members, we can move on to item 3, declaration of interest. And if I go around the table, Councillor Amaraj, no declarations. Councillor Foot, Councillor Vickers, I think you were endeavouring putting your hand up.
It's the usual one, but with the qualification that none of this, what we're discussing on item 3 at the racecourse, is in Newbury Town Council, of which I'm a member. But I was the person who proposed the original outline application be approved back in 2009. So I followed the history of this, and that will not affect my decision tonight. I can absolutely assure you.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Gaines, no. Councillor Dick, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been lobbied on item 1. And also, just a reminder, I did sit on the previous committee meeting in November on this application.
Thank you. And Councillor Williston.
I was on the previous application.
Okay. And of course, likewise, I also visited and also spoke to residents as well on that application.
Chairman, I've spoken to both parties on that one as well.
Thank you. And of course, similar to Councillor Vickers regarding the agenda item 3, I'm also a member of Newbury Town Council and its Planning and Highways Committee, where this item was discussed along with I'm also a member of Greenham Parish Council, where it was also discussed. But obviously tonight I'll weigh up all the evidence and we'll vote accordingly. So members, now we move on to the main part of the agenda, item 4, and sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I beg your pardon. I didn't realise everybody was declaring that they were members of parish councils. I'm also obviously on Newbury Town Council, and I also was at that meeting when the racecourse application was brought up. But as we always say, it won't affect my judgment for tonight's proceedings. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Foot. I think probably on this committee we tend to be make individual statements, whereas of course on some of the parish councils the clerk regularly, even the town council regularly make a statement on behalf of a majority of the members on that committee if they're dual-hatted. Anyway, moving on to the main part of the agenda, we're obviously on to item 4, and we're talking about the application 24/00491/4 Greengates, Font Street, East Garston. And I think I probably need to hand over immediately to your good self, Cheyenne. Okay, so perhaps. Sorry, just for clarification, for probably members of the public are not aware, we will be giving you the opportunity under certain positions to give your presentations as well. But initially, it's the planning officer that will give the presentation on the application, and then I would draw you in the relevant points, places along the schedule of the local parish council objectors, supporters, and obviously applicant and so forth. So over to you again. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application is for Greengates, located in Front Street, East Garston. This application seeks planning permission for the demolition of an existing 3-bedroom structurally compromised cottage and provision of a replacement 3-bedroom cottage with provision for access and related landscaping. This has been brought to committee as we've received over 10 letters of objection. The application site is a dwelling located within the settlement boundary of East Garston, within the North Wessex Downs National Landscape, and within the conservation area and the River Lambourne Special Area of Conservation Neutrality Zone. The application site is also located adjacent to the River Lambourne SSSI and the Lambourne Valley Biodiversity Opportunity Area, as well as adjacent to flood zones 2 and 3. The existing dwelling is an attractive historic cottage displaying a traditional character reflective of the rural area. It's a modest structure of 1.5 stories, constructed of red brick with a roof of half-hip construction with traditional clay tiles. It's prominently located on one of the main thoroughfares that run through the conservation area. The existing dwelling is of local and historic and architectural interest. Its of significance lies in the combination of the building's age, its modest appearance, and the use of traditional materials and techniques. Its communal social value as the former post office and the positive contribution it makes to the historical and architectural unity of East Garston Conservation Area. Therefore, whilst not currently included in the West Berkshire's local list heritage assets, the building is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset within the meaning and definition contained within the NPPF. A structural report was submitted with the application, which concludes that the building is beyond reasonable or practical repair due to excessive lean and instability in the walls and roof, and would therefore need to be rebuilt. Whilst the loss of this attractive dwelling is extremely regretful, however, the council accepts the findings of the structural engineer's report and considers that the rebuild of this dwelling is justified in this instance. The demolition of this building will result in harm to the significance of a non-designated heritage asset. It is considered that provided historic fabric from the existing building, such as the bricks, is salvaged and reused in the new building. The harm is justified as it would provide a public benefit via health and safety. The proposed replacement dwelling is of similar design with an attached subservient in appearance extension, which is proposed to be of painted brickwork with matching clay tile roof. The proposed replacement dwelling will be set back from the road by 2 meters. The previous scheme, which we saw in November, moved the dwelling back by 2.4 meters. The dwelling is also proposed to move 0.8 meters to the southeast. To allow for the existing access to be improved and to allow cars to pass safely to the new off-road parking area located to the rear of the dwelling. The main dwelling is to be constructed of brick and is to replicate the form, design, detailing and appearance of the existing building, albeit with very slightly difference in height. The ridge height is proposed to increase from 6.2 to 6.7 metres. The eaves height along the southeast elevation is going to increase from 3.5 to 3.8 metres. And the eaves height on the northwest elevation will move from 2.1 to 2.2. The proposed plans which set the replacement dwelling back from the highway is considered to have a less than substantial harm on the conservation area. Where a proposal would cause less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, paragraph 208 of the MPPF requires that where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, this harm should be weighed against the public benefit of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. Highway safety is considered to be a public benefit, so should be weighed against what is considered to be the low level, less than substantial harm. Whilst there is a loss of a non-designated heritage asset, suitable justification has been submitted in form of the structural viability report. The structural viability of a building for reuse is a material planning consideration in that it's a replacement, including in a conservation area. It is accepted that the setting back of the proposed dwelling would have an impact on the conservation area, but this impact would be less than substantial, which is outweighed by the public benefits of providing a visibility displays with regards to vehicle and pedestrian safety. It's also noted that the less than substantial harm is at low level. Therefore, the proposal does not result in significant or overwhelming harm to the character of the conservation area. Whilst the proposed replacement dwelling is to be situated further back into the plot and moved to the southeast, closer to the neighbouring dwelling known as Larkspur. The proposed dwelling will move 0.8 metres closer to the neighbouring dwelling, as well as 2 metres further back. An additional first floor window is proposed to the southeast elevation. However, this will be a bathroom and a condition has been recommended for this to be fitted with obscure glazing. It is also noted that the neighbouring dwelling does have a conservatory to the side elevation closest to the application site. However, due to the angle and the distance of around 18 metres compared to the existing 20 metres, along with boundary screening, it's not considered to have a significant impact on neighbouring amenity. Overall, the altered position of the replacement dwelling has been carefully considered, and given that the repositioning would allow for improved visibility displays and sight lines, which would in turn improve the overall highway safety compared to the low level, less than significant harm of repositioning the dwelling it would have on the conservation area. Therefore, when assessing the application as a whole, the planning balance weighs more favourably to the overall improvement in highway safety, given the likelihood of the increased use of the access. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Cheyenne. And now I'm going to call on the parish representative, Dina Carpenter. Right. Is he actually on Zoom?
Yes.
Gareth, can you hear us?
I can hear you indeed, thank you.
Right, okay. Do you need to had any issues in relationship to highways on this application at this stage?
No, I have nothing to add at the moment, Mr. Chairman, but obviously I am here if you have any questions for me.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay. Oh, you're already on the lectern, well done. Okay, you have 5 minutes, and what we will make sure is that at 4 minutes you will be notified the minute before coming to the conclusion of your speech. So over to you. As soon as you start, the clock will start ticking.
Can you hear me? Green Gates has been the most controversial planning application in our village. 52 separate objections have been submitted across 3 planning applications. It is only the second new build in 50 years within the conservation area of the parish. All 3 applications have had incomplete information and inaccurate measurements. The latest application was submitted on March the 11th. Key measurements were still missing regarding the resiting of the cottage on April the 4th. Furthermore, the committee report published just a week ago is the first document to acknowledge that in order to provide minimum driveway width to the southwest, the cottage footprint would need to move 0.8 metres closer to its neighbour and not 0.5 metres as previously stated. This crucial measurement has been incorrect in all previous documentation submitted by the developer. It has been contested since January 2023 by the Parish Council and residents and rightly queried by the West Berks Highways. Although we do not have a village design statement, an East Garston Parish Community Plan was published in June 2010. A comprehensive resident survey was carried out. Almost 70% of residents were against any development that would spoil the character of the picturesque and rural nature of the village. This, along with the amount of objections received, demonstrates the strength of feeling among residents to protect the character of the built form within the parish. Whilst we regret to see the original cottage demolished, the Parish Council does not accept that this should be a green light to move the footprint. Green Gates is at the heart of the East Garston Conservation Area and has been for over 200 years. It is set at right angles to the lane, which is a key characteristic seen all throughout the Lambourne Valley. The site visit illustrated to the committee the constraints of the narrow linear plot. Visibility displays will be very difficult to achieve due to a wall and a mature hedge outside the developer's ownership. The standard highway setback of 2.4 metres, quoted by the planning officer, is unreasonable given the context of the application. This is a replacement dwelling. Standard new build regulations must be weighed against the particularities of a heritage site. The proposed setback of 2 metres offers no more highway safety than a marginal one, yet it would dramatically disrupt the historic integrity of the street scene and encourage traffic to speed up. The space will become a future headache for the Parish Council and residents, as its use will be difficult to police and enforce. The site visit also highlighted the illogical proposal to provide a driveway to the rear. Space of almost 7 metres wide will be developed to the southeast of the plot to provide an access entrance to facilitate the build. The Parish Council does not understand why this more generous route in is not designated as the main driveway. It far exceeds the 3.1 metre proposed for a driveway to the southwest. Being a wider route in and out, it will assist with sightlines and safety. No positive public benefit has been given by the developer or the planning officer to resite Green Gates to provide a driveway to the southwest rather than the obvious southeast. This does not comply with planning policy. Moreover, pursuing a driveway to the southwest will significantly affect the residential amenity of a neighbouring home, and this is in breach of planning policy. It was a reason for refusal for the last application. The Parish Council welcomes the regeneration of the plot. We also appreciate that a planning balance has to be struck. However, we cannot condone an application
1 minute remaining.
that is at the expense of existing village homes and does not respect the appearance and character of the conservation area. The viability of the application does not require the footprint to be significantly moved. To respect its current position more closely requires no compromise by the developer in terms of design or provision of access to the rear. We believe a mutually acceptable proposal is possible, and it is disappointing that this application has not been guided to this end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well within 5 minutes. If you just wait at the lectern, it could be a case there'll be members to ask questions. And I see Councillor Vickers has got his hand up.
I wondered if I'd misheard you when you said the visibility display should be 8 metres, which is a lot bigger than 2 metres. Okay, I did mishear you. Sorry.
Okay, right, Councillor Hamaraj.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mrs. Jana Carpenter. You mentioned 52 opposing objectives to this application over the 3 years, and majority of them are opposing because of the streets, and I understand. But you mentioned it's you mentioned in your speeches that this development will impact the rural nature of the village. Considering that the plan before us and during the site visit, we've clarified that the proposal is to use the existing materials as much as possible. How do you think this will impact the rural nature of this village?
It's more the setting back of the cottage, because you're changing what has been there for 200 years. And it is a natural pinch point in the village. It does encourage people to slow down because that part of the road is narrow. So it's more for that. It's when you walk around the village, you know where Greengates is because that's the only cottage that has that. There are other cottages on the road, but that one with the eaves is the only cottage like that in the village.
Any other questions?
Please.
Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your contribution. You seem to be suggesting, sorry, go back a stage. At the site meeting, we learned that the entrance for the building work will be on the other side, not the proposed driveway for the new house. You seem to suggest that all the objectors will melt away if the driveway is simply put where the temporary one is going to be for the builders. I'm asking you, that's the impression you give. Did you mean to give that? Are you confident in that or not? Yes or no? I'm
pretty confident, yeah, that most of the objections, the majority of them would, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just asking for your opinion. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the questions. Thanks very much. Right, I now call upon the objector, Lindsay Mason. Again, you got 5 minutes, Lindsay. Okay.
Good evening. In November 2023, committee members refused the approval of the previous application for Greengates. Reason 3 for refusal concerned the repositioning of the replacement cottage within the plot and concluded that this would have a significant impact on the privacy and amenity of my home, contrary to the MPPF policy CS14 and the quality design SPD. The committee report published by the Planning Office just 1 week ago contained revised key measurements. The replacement cottage will now be built even closer to my home. This resiting will therefore impact on my home to an even greater degree. If the cottage was being renovated rather than rebuilt, there would be no debate about visibility splay lines, and the access route to the rear would be delivered by the ample room available to the southeast. Due to rebuilding, the planning officer is advocating the alteration of the historic layout of the street scene at the heart of the conservation area. This alteration will significantly impact on the amenity of my home. It will also mean the loss of a local area special characteristic, the pinch point, which naturally reduces traffic speed. Establishing visibility splays is a calculation. I have seen no calculations that confirm a setback of 2 meters will offer a significant public benefit. Yet the loss of the pinch point will result in a negative impact on public safety, as traffic speed will increase. If the replacement cottage moves back 2 meters in the plot, with an additional 4 meter long elevated brick extension, habitable rooms of my home will be overlooked where they currently are not. This simple fact constitutes a significant harm to my amenity. The proposal to provide a driveway to the southwest rather than the southeast has not been shown by the developer or the planning officer to provide any positive public benefit. To pursue a driveway to the southwest requires a movement of almost 1 meter towards my home. With the added fenestration to the southeast elevation and increased ridge and eave heights, this will significantly overlook my living room and conservatory, where the current cottage does not. This planning application therefore does not accord with the MPPF and development plan policies. A core planning principle of the MPPF is to secure a good standard of amenity for all existing occupants. I will be losing the amenity I currently have. The committee report section 6.4 notes the housing site allocations DPD as attracting substantial weight in the determination of applications for new residential development. Policy C6 advises that any alteration or extension to a dwelling should cause no significant harm to the living conditions currently enjoyed by residents of neighbouring properties, Extension should not give rise to increased overlooking, be of an overbearing nature, or have a serious adverse impact on habitable rooms of adjacent properties. There have been no elevated extensions permitted in the village to date. It will be 12 metres from my conservatory, where there is currently no built form. The bedroom window will be 18 metres from my living room window and 17.5 metres from my glass roof conservatory. I would like to add these measurements are based on a 0.5 metre shift and not 0.8. The West Berkshire Quality Design SBD dictates a minimum requirement of separation of 21 metres. I was very disappointed with the guidance given to councillors by the planning officer at the site meeting regarding separation distances, with the implication being none apply in this case. The settlement form in East Garston is typical of a downland village and is not uniform. Green Gates faces into my living room and conservatory. If relocated, habitable rooms will look directly into my habitable rooms. Separation standards are therefore relevant and should apply. In 2008,
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. In 2008, I was not permitted to move the footprint of my garage on my driveway due to the conservation status of the village. Today, the planning office is recommending reciting an entire cottage, the positive public benefits of which still remain unclear to me. But the significant harm to the amenity of my home, its setting, and the conservation area are very real. I appreciate that planning approval is a matter of balance. The balance of planning in this instance is between enabling a new development, but also protecting existing village homes, the street scene, and the wider setting. This cottage can be built in a way that respects the conservation area and its neighbours. It is disappointing that developer has not engaged in any way with the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to Lindsay? Okay, Councillor Havaraj.
Thank you, Mrs. Commissioner. I just have a question, two questions from your point. First is on you mentioned about the pinch point. I think the previous speaker also.
Yes.
So just a question from the plans, are you still raising to us that there will be a pinch point even after the proposal that there will be a box hedge in front of the property when it is the walls are.
Yes.
So the box hedge would still occupy that 2 meters mostly, and it would be still not access for the cars. So do you think still that would be a pinch, lose the pinch point?
I do. I think all of us, having lived in the village for over 15 years, the curb and the hedge will be very difficult to enforce 5 years down the line. It will be a very useful space. Space along Front Street is a premium. Not many of us have a lot of it, and not many of us have visibility out of our properties. The position of space beside the cottage will invariably become a useful pulling over space, particularly if the cottage puts the 3.1 metres down the southwest. Transit vans won't get down there. Any large vehicles won't get down there. So any work done, any visitors in larger cars will not be able to access the back of the cottage. And I think that's a really important point. Whereas the other side, there'll be a lot more room to accommodate all kinds of sizes of vehicle.
Thank you for that. And my next question is, we've been to your, thanks for allowing us to visit your property.
You're very welcome.
To look at the impact. We will discuss that in the later, but I just want to question, you mentioned that your living room and the conservatory would be impacted by the new height. Do you still think that would be an issue, considering there is a proposal and condition to use the windows of the habitual rooms of the new development will have obscure windows?
It's not just that window that comes into play. If it moves 2.2 metres back and across by a metre towards me, almost all three windows start to become difficult because it will be sliding up adjacent to me rather than the settlement form at the moment. We're almost we make kind of a right angle. So the further use, also the very important point to make, our properties aren't parallel. So the further the property comes back, the more it converges on me. So even the two windows at the end of the elevated extension will have a view onto my property. Obviously, the further away it stays, the more chance I have to mitigate that. But the minute you move it back, the footprint back and the footprint across, I'm going to start having to think about extremely tall hedges. And I always think if you've got to start talking about soft planting, there's something wrong with the planning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, members at all? No? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I now call upon the applicant, Howard Porter, or speaking on behalf of the applicant, I think. Again, you have 5 minutes and we will notify you after 4 minutes. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Our proposal to replace this compromised cottage was first submitted in November 2021, at which point, contrary to what has been previously said in this forum, I personally met with neighbours and the parish council to discuss the reasons behind our proposal for what was then a much larger L-shaped replacement cottage. At this time, the parish council's first response to planning officers was to raise no objection, subject to conditions. However, following the subsequent submission of a number of similar representations from village residents, this parish position was reversed and withdrawn, and a subsequent objection response submitted. Accordingly, and in the light of these concerns raised, we withdrew this initial scheme in April 2022 and began discussions with officers to address suggested revisions. These discussions included a pre-application submission and a subsequent compliant new design that was submitted formally as a new application proposal in November 2022. This revised approach drew the support of planning, highways and heritage officers, subject of course to some appropriate conditions being attached to the consent. Notwithstanding this support and a recommendation to approve from your officers, this proposal was refused at Planning Committee last November 2023. We have appealed against that decision. Again, in the meantime, and in order to try and broker a scheme which satisfies all parties and deals with the refusal points, we have now further amended the size, design and arrangement of the replacement cottage, but in doing so have preserved the gains and benefits as previously achieved in build quality, parking, landscaping and highway safety terms. The latest proposal provides for off-street parking and on-site turning to standard. Sightline visibility improvements achieved by a modest 2-metre setback of the gable end at the road edge and retains the replica design and detailing of the existing cottage. We're pleased to note the continued support for this approach from the Council's planning heritage and highway officers. The scheme as now before you also continues to offer opportunities to increase boundary planting by way of a landscape condition, which can also secure a physical boundary at the cottage's gable end to prevent on-road parking here. This setback and detail is not seen by your heritage officer as a feature alien to the character of the conservation area. Also, in terms of the proposal's relationship with the adjoining occupiers, we have also further amended the first floor arrangements to ensure that opportunities for overlooking are no worse than the situation that exists at present. In response to our continued discussions with officers and in addressing the previous reason for refusal, our architects, Fowlers, have again produced a further reduced scheme before you this evening, which draws support from all of your professional advisors. The revised scheme results in a proposal that properly addresses the many physical and environmental constraints presented by this difficult site in a manner that will also allow the site to be brought back to beneficial use as an energy-efficient family home. This time with all services made available and connected within a replica cottage design of modest dimensions, commensurate in siting and scale within the plot in which it sits, and which removes the need for multi-car on-street parking to serve the village. I can do no more than ask that you take your officer's advice in relation to the overall planning balance achieved here and support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question. Members? Councillor Gaines?
Yes, thank you for that, Chair. You said that, oh, sorry, in 2023, that you had a refusal and you said you went to appeal.
That appeal has been submitted, yes.
So it's still in,
It's running.
okay, thank you.
Okay, was that just one question, Councillor Gaines? Okay, Councillor Willison's next and then Councillor Foot.
Thank you. The comments from the residents and the parish council seem to relate to whether the access point should be to the left or the right of the proposed building. Why are you so adamant that it needs to be to the left?
We're not adamant at all. We just basically felt that the access existing could be improved. To put it, there's a wall, an existing wall on the right-hand side, and that was put to us over and over again that this was really important. So we've retained that with the gate that was there originally. And the access that was on the left is an existing access, and that has just been widened slightly to get round to the back of the property. It would seem illogical to do anything other than that. According to our architects, our conservation advisor, and our planning consultant.
Apart from the fact that obviously it's moving the building 8.8 of a metre towards your next door neighbour.
That's to get the access up the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the neighbouring issue, I think you'll find, and I hope your planning officer will give you this, but all the dimensions have been submitted on a drawing to the planning officer. So you will have that somewhere on your notes, and you will see that what has been said is perhaps not exactly as the drawing shows.
Okay.
Okay, but I ask you to ask your planning officer about that because quite detailed drawings have been submitted.
Okay, Councillor Wilson. Okay, right, Councillor Foot.
That was precisely my question, Chair, so I've got no further.
I have a question from the chair. I think you did use the word recycling, and I was trying to listen carefully what you was talking about materials. You did. Did you mention about recycling? You did. Okay. All right. Okay. Because obviously questions, even from myself, have to be relevant to your particular presentation. But I did have a question on recycling, but recycling the bricks. But obviously you didn't mention it, so I can't technically ask you that question.
Well, I didn't mention it, but the question of using existing materials was raised earlier by the planning officer. If I can just say that the rear roof, the rear pitch, is all concrete tile, which must have been there at least 30 to 40 years. And the clay tiles on the front, most of them are spalled, most of them. So it will have to be a reclaimed clay tile that goes back on. So I wouldn't think there's more than a handful of tiles that can be reused off the main house roof. And again, I'm sure your planning officer can confirm that. A lot of the bricks are damaged, so they'll have to be carefully sourced. You can get reclaimed bricks. You have to be careful when, under NHBC, they insist on a 60-year life on bricks. So this will have to be, I would think, an architect's certified rebuild with using reclaimed bricks. Not all of them, but I don't think you'll get, that's why the building's falling down, because it's been repointed with cement and sand rather than lime mortar. So that retains the moisture in the face of the brickwork, which then blows. So you end up with weakened bricks. Anybody else in here is a chartered surveyor knows what I'm talking about, but that is the case.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Okay. Now call upon the ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. Being tail end, Charlie, there may be some duplication, but do forgive me. Members, this application was considered by this committee back in November 23, as we've heard, and refused due to its design, size and placement. But it was thereabouts on the original footprint. The applicant has, to his credit, taken on board the committee's views regarding the previous design in this submission, and in my opinion is a more sympathetic and softer build on the site. But unfortunately, it has been moved quite considerably off the original footprint, and in doing so has caused situations which have generated the objection from the residents of East Garston. Firstly, the development has been moved back off Front Street by 2 metres. Members, I'm sure you will agree following the site meeting on Monday that East Garston is the idyllic English and downland village, and Front Street in particular being the jewel in the crown of the village, with thatched cottages dotted along the banks of the River Lambourne. The street scene down Front Street has been uninterrupted for over 100 years, and by moving the house back and across off the street significantly changes this historic vista, a vista the long-standing residents wish to retain. Secondly, the development has been moved approximately 1 metre to the east of the site towards Larkspur, the property of Mrs. Mason, who we have heard from most eloquently this evening. This and the previous application has caused her much anxiety and distress, having experienced total privacy in her property since moving in there over 15 years ago. One might ask why, in this application, the development has been moved so far. Not for us to consider as part of our decision-making process this evening, but is it to allow a wider access for further development at the rear of the property at a later date? Just a thought. And another thought. Greengates is not listed, but a non-heritage asset. The structural survey suggests it is not structurally sound and should be demolished. However, if it had been listed or a non-heritage asset, it would more than likely have to be saved and therefore not moved off the original footprint. Such is the fine line here. Our planning policies in this case have been gently massaged, and the planning officer has deemed that the harm done is not substantial enough to consider a refusal. This is the dichotomy this committee faces. From the planning officer's presentation this evening, I did not feel that there was a strong recommendation for approval. If the long-serving members of the committee cast their mind back to the days of planning officer Derek Carnegie, as he would have put it, it's in the balance. And that is what we have to decide this evening with this application. Do we as committee members want to be responsible for scarring an idyllic village scene and its historic heritage? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Questions to the ward member, please. Councillor Gaines.
Thank you, Councillor Winston. You mentioned that the original application was, is it on the actual site that's there now?
It was, yeah.
So the one that's refused is actually on the same footprint that the house is now, not 2 metres back?
It was 2.5 metres back, the previous application.
Okay, thank you.
And with regards to the splay lines, as I say, moving it back 0.5 metre and then putting a laurel hedge in front is going to encroach on that splay line anyway. So why move it back at all?
No other question.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other members' questions? Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Right, members, we now get to the point where you've got the opportunity to ask clarification of either Gareth Dowding on highways issues or Cheyenne Kirby on the planning side. So over to you, members. Councillor.
Question to Mr. Dowding. We've heard about the visibility display, and almost the last thing that the ward member said was about the hedge. It is a very big problem right across the district that hedges are not managed by their owners, but it's actually quite simple to for residents to report it, and of course it's the obligation of the owner. But is there anything more we can do this evening to strengthen the condition that will ensure that the hedge is maintained as it should be? Because as long as it's a box hedge at the sort of table height, it's not going to obstruct visibility.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, there isn't anything we as a highway authority can do to strengthen the condition, because obviously it's the planning authority that would. Hang on, I've just been asked to start my video. Right, I hope you can see me. it's a planning condition. It's under high, it's a planning authority that put the condition on. The condition is strong enough in its own right. The fact that if the hedge grows above the 600 mil, which is conditioned, then it's planning enforcement. We as a highway authority can instruct our own contractors to go out and actually trim the hedge back down to the appropriate level if needs be. It's not something which we like to do, but we can serve notice on residents. It's a 28-day notice. We can insist on it to be done, and we will do it ourselves. So if the hedge is identified as exceeding the height that's been conditioned, there are mechanisms in place to deal with that.
Thank you for that clarification. I hope that the public take note of that.
Further questions, members? Yes. Sorry, Raj.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may, to the planning officer, please. First on that one would be when we were visiting the site, we were looking at the street scene as it is, but we were requesting if during this meeting you could provide some kind of simulated street scene for the proposed one where we could see the pinch point. Is it available now, or?
I have sort of a photo and a street scene that was submitted as part of the scheme that I can show you. Let me just get that for you. So this will be the street scene. We haven't got a simulated 3D version because that's something that the agent would have to submit because that's not what we have available to us for modelling reasons. But this would be the proposed street scene. I'm not sure if it's very clear, but you can see the blue outline is the existing dwelling's roof line, and then it's probably not particularly clear. I've tried to make it as big as I can on there, but there's a little blue line that I can point to around here. That's the existing property line, and then the darker is the proposed, and then I have a footprint image that you can see just to see the difference between the purple, once my laptop decides to play ball. So the purple is the existing house on site, right up against the road. And then the orange roof line is the proposed dwelling. And it shows the visibility splays, and it's also conditioned for the height of the hedge. Is there any follow-up question to that?
Sorry, yes, please. In the previous diagram, you're showing the street scene. Sorry if I'm not understanding correctly. The box edge is not visible, the hedges is not visible, and then the plan indicates that the existing wall is still going to be on exactly on the road. It doesn't show that it is true.
Yeah,
it is inwards.
Because the street scene is like plan view, so it's a bit difficult to see it. You'd only really see, I think you want like a 3D model, which is something that we can't do. It was something that the agent would have to submit, but they couldn't submit it 5 days before committee.
Okay.
So I think that's what you need is like a 3D image, but it's only shown on plan view that we have evidence of.
Okay, that's fine. I was going to, it was nice to have from the site meeting, but what I wanted to absolutely clarify was with the box edge proposed in the front of the building, the street scene would be altered significantly what is now currently is. That's what I'm understanding. Yeah.
No, because in terms of significance, so we've deemed this, so the moving of the dwelling is considered low level, less than significant harm. So on the scale of harm that the conservation officer has to use as set out in the MPPF, this is considered to be low level, less than substantial harm. So moving it back, whilst the public benefits of an improved access does outweigh that because of it's going to be used more frequently. So the conservation officer has deemed it sort of, it's my job to determine whether it's overweighs it. And in this case, I've deemed that the improved access visibility displays has outweighed the conservation officer's concern, but the concern is very low level in terms of the scale of significance. So in my opinion and the conservation officer's opinion, moving it back would not be significant harm on the conservation area.
Okay, thank you for your, Chairman, if I may have one more questions quickly to planning officer. So one of the conditions on the, it says reuse of the existing brickworks as much as possible. But what we seem to be hearing from the agent is that there is no possibility of that. Unlikely it is going to happen. And the condition states that if no development takes place in point 3, that until a sample of the new reclined brick has been submitted to and approved in writing. I think we already getting a view that this will not be possible and this condition would be kind of it's negated. So what is that proposal? Because from the board member, we heard Councillor Hooker mentioning that if this building would have been a listed one, we wouldn't even look at this application for consideration. It would have been refused. And this one is a significant condition where reuse of the materials to assimilate with the existing properties and the village scene is really an important one, I think.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, the condition is on there to do the best that we can do about reusing the bricks. I mean, unfortunately, we can't help the condition of the bricks, and it's a little bit of case of we either let it rot and we can't use any bricks if nobody comes in for a proposal in 10 years' time, we'll have no bricks. But we're conditioning the fact that the bricks we can use to get a new dwelling there is we get to review them and we get to ensure that they are the best bricks for that particular street scene. So the condition does, whilst there will be some loss and we will have to have some reclaimed or some new bricks, at the moment we don't know how many can be reused, but you wouldn't know until the building's demolished anyway. So this condition allows us to have more control in the types of bricks that would be used. So if we deem that mainly the conservation officer will look at these. So if she deems that they're not acceptable, we'll ask them to go away and get new bricks, get different bricks until we're satisfied with that.
Okay, thanks for your comment.
Okay, right, Councillor Gaines.
Yeah, a question for the officer. Who will decide whether the bricks and tiles that are currently in use on that building are actually not able to be used again? Because we hear, I mean, when we were there on the site visit on Monday, to my uneducated eye, the roof bricks, the roof tiles look very good. So who will actually decide that they're not capable of being used again, and the bricks? Would it be the applicant or will it be our officers?
Yeah. The way the conditions worded it, so it states existing roof tiles from the main roof, which is to be removed as part of the proposal, shall be reused in the proposed works, and it's the applicant's responsibility to comply with that. And then it goes on to say where there's insufficient that they should roof tiles available, then that we look at samples. So it's the standard way. It's the applicant's responsibility to follow it. Obviously, if they don't follow that, then that's an enforcement issue. If members are minded to grant approval and would like a scheme to there to be some form of approval process in that condition, that's something we could possibly look at. If you're concerned that's not strong enough. So, for example, before there can be a prior approval put in there that there needs to be a submission and we need to agree it. We're happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
To that extent.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gaines. Right, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit more concerned than I was originally, having read the report, having heard from the applicant here that the state of these bricks and materials aren't in particularly good condition, and the difficulty possibly of finding anything that is going to be acceptable. I'll ask the planning officer, is the bottom line, can you guarantee that the residents of East Garston aren't going to be subject to a wimpy home in the middle of an AONB idyllic English downland village?
Chairman, obviously, whenever we have a new build development, we could take a judgment of what conditions we put on in terms of materials. Sometimes we say to match, sometimes it's specified. If we are requiring samples of the condition, that's the strongest control we can exercise. If there's an opportunity to reuse existing tiles, then that's obviously welcome. You've heard and you can take a view on the likelihood of that being the case, and that can affect your view of that. But ultimately, even if that wasn't the case, approving samples of materials is the strongest control we can put in place.
Just sort of follow up, Chairman. At the last committee meeting, if you remember, we did talk about using the best bricks we could on the front. But I go back to my point, if we can't get bricks for the whole build or even replacement bricks that are acceptable, it won't be nice for the residents of Larkspur if they get the new build viewing from their residence.
So all I can say, Chairman, is if we're approving samples of materials, that's the strongest control the local authority can exercise in that respect, as with any development.
Councillor Wilson.
Can I follow up with my question to the applicant? Why is there not a possibility of putting this house or proposed new house on the same plot and position as the old one, and putting the access to the right-hand side as you look at the house, and therefore removing a lot of the overlooking issues for the next door neighbour?
Yeah, I will do. Thank you. Ultimately, we have to determine the application before us and assess whether or not we think it complies with policy and whether there's any harm. Obviously, you're hearing about potential alternatives, and I think that's relevant to a degree to conversations, but I would encourage members to focus on the proposal in front of them and whether they think that is acceptable.
Chairman, can I follow up on that? If there were to be a new application with an access on the right-hand side, would it be acceptable? Or would it be recommended?
I can't comment on that without seeing some plans. So it's not to be difficult, but okay, who knows what it is.
I think the question really probably should be duly answered probably by Ed Gareth as well. I mean, I don't know whether you've got raise any points in relation to that access.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, yes, I was going to say the reason why we have concentrated more on the access as it is at the moment is that it's an existing access. The changes to the footprint, to the movement of it, have allowed for the existing access to have betterment, which is always a good thing. If a completely new access is constructed on the other side for everyday daily use, not just for the construction use, but for everyday daily use, it would then be a brand new access which would have to fully comply with all new standards. So therefore, the betterment value would have to be considerably greater, and there would have to probably be some more major changes to the splays either side of the access in order that it would comply with the current standards. At least with the existing access, we can allow a degree of betterment, which obviously this is with the display being formed on the front of the moved building, without having to worry too much about the fact that the visibility to the right-hand side of the access as you're going out is unfortunately slightly restricted by the existing wall which is there. But again, see, this is an existing access. It has a degree of having already been used as an access way. What the developer is doing here is that he is improving it as much as he can within the constraints that he has, which is always a win-win for the highway authority.
All members, exhausted your questions to officers. If that's the case, I'm open to debate. Right, ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I am concerned with this application. As we heard very quietly this evening, the applicant has actually made representation to the inspector while this application is running. It's not considered well, I think, by this committee to run two applications, run two horses on one application. The applicant is obviously confident that he may well get that first application through. And if he does, I think he will run with the original application, which we refused. And I think we ought to consider whether we ought to be making a decision on this application tonight with the other one running. I think we ought to wait until the other application has been deemed. And I think this ought to be deferred until we hear that. We are a busy committee. This meeting tonight, we have 3 applications, which is going to go on to possibly 9:30. We've got 28 applications sat in the wings waiting to be heard, of which we've got to sit for days, a couple of days, 4 days to get them through. I suggest we push this one aside, get on with the other 2, save ourselves some time and some money and wait for the outcome. I know it's early, I know it's controversial, but I would like to propose very early on that this application is deferred. And I look if I could get some support on that, please.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Hooker. I'm going to look around the table for let's say support for that proposal on deferral at the moment, or do you wish to continue on discussion?
Chairman, I'd like to actually put the contrary case. The very fact that we have spent half an hour discussing it is not going to help reduce the time we spend at a future meeting looking at it again. I think we've heard some very good speeches from all the speakers, and I think we've got enough to make a judgment on this. The matter that we have the previous application at appeal, I think the ward member may think that the appeal will go one way or the other, but I think we should set that aside. The fact is there is an appeal, there is an application that might go ahead, and we have to look at that perhaps compared with this. So, I mean, I'm happy if that we want to have a call a vote, but I'm not speaking to second the ward member's proposal.
Okay, so are you actually going to put a counter proposal? Because
I need to, because I don't know that I need
get
to.
a seconder, it falls.
Sorry, you haven't asked for a second.
Okay.
Can I make a slightly different point? I would see that what's been asked from my left is a technical point, a legal point, and you have a legal advisor. Has she any comment about the fact that we now know there's appeal running in the background? What is the expectation of this evening?
Chairman, if I may, because it's planning procedural point it more. I think I am obliged to caution members against deferral because as the local planning authority, we have an obligation to determine the applications are put towards us. I can understand how it's desirable to wait the outcome of an appeal decision, but we are expected to determine applications as swiftly as we can get to, as we can do. So it does potentially, I'm not saying for sure, but I have seen cases where it can expose us to risk that bill, I must say. So thank you.
I think that is sensible and constructive advice on this point. So I think we will continue on the debate. So Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I had my hand up, I think, immediately after the ward member anyway, but I continued to make the points I was going to make before I heard the application to defer. Chairman, I think we've got 3 clear issues here, which are firstly the impact on the street scene and on the whole conservation of appearance of East Garston. We've got the privacy from the neighbour, the concern about privacy, and we've got the vehicle highways issues. And I think on all 3, we've heard some very good arguments both ways. And as somebody who listened to the arguments last time, I think the applicant has done a pretty good job at trying to meet most of those comments, but some of them weigh against each other. For example, moving the application back to get better visibility displays at an existing access inevitably reduces the distance between habitable rooms and the neighbour. But I don't think, given the extremely acute angles at which somebody who was Peeping Tom looking out of their bedroom window might see somebody in the early morning or late evening in the summer in their conservatory, despite there being an existing reasonably high hedge from what I recall at that site visit last time. I don't think that's really significant. And I think the improvements to the highway access are significant. I mean, when I look at these applications in a conservation area, I think to myself, yes, we have to conserve and value the past, but we also have to live in the present. And in planning, we are obliged to look at sustainable development and look into the future. We are in a very different age in terms of how we move ourselves around to when this was built. And I think we are obliged when looking at new builds in conservation areas to have reasonable concern for the safety of those who use the highway in the day when we've got very wide, very solid vehicles that are going to hit vulnerable pedestrians. So we need to provide better footway provision and better access onto and off the highway for vehicles. And in terms of the third matter, the impacts on the conservation area, as I say, I think the applicant has done the best, and the conditions we have before us are the best we can imagine to be reasonable, apart from what Councillor Gaines, my colleague, has suggested about prior approval of the new materials. So I don't feel it would be wise to refuse the application, especially as I think for all its faults, it's better than what we have that might get approved at appeal. That's what I've got to say.
So having said all that, Councillor Vickers, are you actually proposing the?
I think it's too early to propose. I'm sure other members have a view, but that's the way I'm moving towards, unless I'm persuaded otherwise.
Okay, right. Councillor Amaraj.
Thank you, Chairman. I hear from Councillor Vickers, who's an expert in this one. I wanting to hear from his views. And initially, I was going to side with what Councillor Hooker said, deferral, because I was thinking on the same lines. Because from the applicant's update here in this committee, we clear that they're still pursuing the previous rejected application. So the likely scenario, although Mr. Dre said we shouldn't be considering, but we should be looking at a scenario where this application is approved. The previous application, if approved by the decision is overrun by the inspector, applicant would be going with the previous application. So it would be a more, I think, the situation which we all don't want to happen. But what I'm trying to say here is, okay, that's settled now, so we don't want to go in that. What I'm trying to say and argue here in this debate is for us as a committee to consider all the aspects of the points raised by the parish council, objectors, and the applicant as well. And in this one, this application, the revised one, has got many flaws in it. I have to absolutely agree with that, because the flaws with moving the building to 2 meters, the neighbors' visibility and privacy issues, and then access or visibility in a street scene is definitely, there is a flaw in there. But I'm looking at a perspective of, okay, is it, if we approve this with all the conditions we could put and make sure that the street scene is maintained to some extent by the hedge, the box hedge, we need to determine that the box hedge height can be put some any conditions. That might be I request to the officers. If you put enough conditions in there, my thinking is, and for the committee to discuss and think about it, if we approve it, maybe there is a chance that the applicant would go ahead with this design, with this proposal, instead of pursuing the old one. So it might be we'll get the lesser of the T with the less flawed application with certain conditions we can influence as a committee instead of guessing on the one with the inspector. So that is my view. That doesn't mean that we approve. I tend to approve this wholeheartedly because it has flaws, but we as a committee can, I think, influence this one to put some conditions in it on the box edge, in my view, and then the reuse of bricks before the start of development, then I think I'm inclined to approve this because of that reason I mentioned. No.
Okay, you keep mentioning about approving it, but are you prepared to propose it? We can talk about the conditions with the officers in a minute, but and you. Sorry, sorry, I think my is it working now? Sorry. Okay. I think you kept on mentioning about you know, you're prepared to approve it, but you didn't actually prepare to propose it. And I think we can talk about the conditions if you're prepared to go up.
Chairman, as Councillor Vickers said, that I think we need to hear from all the other members.
Okay,
but I'm
I'll
happy to
continue on
propose.
round the table if
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
case.
Point of order, please, Chairman. I don't think you should be leading the committee members as them to make a proposal or second. That should come naturally. You shouldn't put Councillor Armour under pressure to
Well,
make a proposal. Or
I'm
Councillor
sorry,
Vickers. It should come
Councillor
naturally.
Hooker, but he kept on making these comments, and I was trying to draw him one way or the other, and obviously
I'm sure
perhaps I
he's quite
shouldn't have
capable of
done.
doing that himself.
But anyway, let's continue on round the table for the comments. Councillor Williston.
I think we need to be pragmatic. I was reluctant about this application at the start, but having heard from the officers about, in particular, sightlines and such, I think this is probably about the best we're going to get. And the alternative is leave a old building to just fall down and fall apart, which is in no one's interest. So it is with a degree of reluctance, I have to say, I'm going to suggest that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williston. And looking at Councillor Gaines.
I'm not going to.
You're not going to second, but you're going to make comments. Okay, continue on then with the debate.
So I think it's extremely sad that this building has to go. I really do. Given it's such a late 18th century, early 19th century building, it's a travesty that it has to go in the first place. I'm very mindful that we should actually use every available material that's currently on that site again, where possible. I think that's really important. We put something in, Mr. Dre, to do that, so we actually make sure that whatever we can use again, the applicant does use again. I was in two minds until I heard from Mr. Downing, sorry, about the differences between one exit and it was one entrance and the other entrance. Now I see the reason for the second entrance not being able to be used. I'm more mindful to say that I also would probably approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, continuing on round the table. We've got a proposal, but we haven't had a second.
I'm happy to second that.
You're happy to
I
second.
think to pick on Councillor Williston's words as the proposer, I think there's more of a scar with what's there now than there would be with this. I think somebody used the word wimpy build as somebody who works for Wimpy many years ago.
There is
No,
other
the point
builders, I
about
might
these-
add.
A single dwelling like this, I'm pretty sure the builder will have a purchaser on hand, and I'm sure any prospective purchaser would want to make sure that the best job is done. And that's the difference between spec building and building in the way I'd like to see it, where you just buy a site, sell the site to a future owner, and then the owner ensures there's a damn sight better build. At the moment, you get rubbish building, frankly, from the successors to Wimpy, and we certainly aren't going to get that here.
Right, I'm looking at a proposal on secondary in relationship to conditions. Is there anything specifically you need to raise with
I think it's the reuse of materials is probably the key.
Yeah, carry on.
Chairman, if I may comment, since Councillor Gaines asked me the question, I've had a proper read back through the conditions just to see, because I read out to you the one about resalvaging roof tiles. What I didn't appreciate then was the interplay with the other materials condition, which is required a schedule anyway. So I think it would work fine anyway, because they have to approve that detail at the outset. But if members want to make it absolutely belt and braces, we can amend condition 4 to cross-reference and say that details shall be provided of what can be salvaged as part of condition, the other condition, condition 6. Sorry, condition 9 amended to refer to condition 6, beg your pardon. So,
Chairman,
Does that meet the agreement of the proposer and seconder? Sorry, I think before I come back in, I think Councillor Amaterage wanted to actually make comment, but
Thank you, Chair.
I don't want to prolong the debate. But
No, it's not a debate. I want to suggest one, and members consider another condition, which I think I mentioned, the box edge. We want to provide any condition on the height of the box edge to make sure that the street scene is not impacted or not fully altered. And one more condition, I just remember kind of seeing this one as influential. Number one, it says the expiration for 3 years before the date of service planning. If we approve it, can we shorten that one to say there will be just instead of 3 years, 1 year to start? Is it something viable for us to enforce as a condition?
If I may, Chairman, firstly on the box hedge, I just need to be clear with members that obviously the condition for the displays requires that it's limited to a maximum of 0.6, so it can't go beyond that because that will be contradictory and obviously cause a separate issue. But obviously landscaping is as proposed. On the 3 years, it's standard starting time is 3 years. I would be reluctant to encourage members to consider shorter time. I think you need to have a good reason to change it, to deviate from it, a good planning reason to. It is within your gift, but you need. I recommend you have a clear planning reason.
Okay, Councillor Dick, I think, was that on conditions as well?
No, it's not. We're drifting in one direction very clearly and talking about conditions. I just really say I'm extremely disappointed about the street scene aspect of this. I hear the mitigation. I respect the officer who's thought carefully about this and explained her position, but I don't agree, and that's my right. I also don't agree that the damage to the neighbour, and I'll use layman's terms, is something that we should ignore the way we are about to. So you can tell which way I will vote. Thank you.
You're right, Councillor.
On that point and following up from Councillor Dick there, and I'll ask the planning officer, I think we're going in a direction here and I'm just trying to safeguard the interests of the neighbour. Is there anything we can do with regards to the overlooking windows, with regards to obscuring or whatever at this stage? Just give it some consideration. I think I know the answer, but I think I'd just like to ask the question.
Thank you. I think, Chairman, we've already recommended a condition for obscure glazing the window, which is the closest to serve the bathroom. Obviously, any condition we've put on has to pass the condition test, one of them's being reasonable. And so if you're looking to obscure windows which aren't bathrooms, that's obviously a lot more challenging.
I will also note that we do have a PD removal condition for further dormers and windows, extensions and outbuildings. So they can't in future add any dormers or further windows without coming in for planning permission. So we've secured it in terms of permitted development rights as well. I believe that is under condition 26.
Further comments, members at all? Therefore, we've had a proposal, we've had a seconder, we've identified conditions to put forward on the motion. Can I have a show of hands, all in favour, please? Against? Okay, and I shall obviously abstain from the chair. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for representatives of East Garston for attending, and feel free to leave the meeting if you so wish. Do you want, I was going to say, I was going to ask for, I'm going to suspend the set after the second one for a few minutes, but do you want me just to hold forth? Okay.
Chairman, are we taking a short break?
Well, I'm hoping it's not going to be more than a minute. I've just given him the benefit of the doubt just to say, I suppose, consolidate his views with his members, but my preferred position is to continue on because there's other people waiting for the two other applications.
My thoughts just with the live stream at the moment.
Yeah.
The adjourn for 3 minutes.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. Go. Okay, right. Ross, sorry for the sort of slight delay, but I thought it was appropriate that the ward member should just quickly speak to representatives of East Garston before we moved on to item 4.2.
Thank you for that, Chairman.
Okay, which is the planning application 22/01 899/4 land west of the pumping station of Emborne. And again, I'm going to hand it over to your good self, Cheyenne.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for change of use of land for 2 gypsy traveller pitches comprising of the siting of 1 mobile home, 1 touring caravan and the proposal of 1 day room per pitch. So in total, that'll bring it to 2 mobile homes, 2 touring caravans and 2 day room pitches. This has been brought to committee as over 10 letters of objection have been received. The application site is located in open countryside as defined by the core strategy policy. The site is an agricultural equestrian field located on the northern bank of the River Enborne and on the edge of the North Wessex Downs national landscape. To the east is a pumping station and the northern boundary faces the main Enborne Row, wash water. The area is surrounded by scattered dwellings and agricultural fields. The site has previously been approved for the construction of stabling and hard standing, change of use from agriculture to mixed agriculture equestrian use and soft landscaping scheme. This permission has been implemented with the stables constructed and landscaping carried out. The unauthorised works currently on site, including hard standing and the installation of mobile homes and vehicles not in relation to the implemented stables permission, commenced on the 2nd of June 2022. This application was submitted shortly after. The proposal before you seeks to provide an improved scheme to what is currently unauthorised development on site. The proposal includes change of use of the land for 2 traveller pitches, including 1 mobile home, touring caravan and day room per pitch. Policy CS7 is the principal development management policy for this proposed development, which permits gypsy and traveller sites in the countryside subject to criteria as set out in the report. The council has a legal duty to plan for adequate accommodation for the gypsy and traveller community. The council has a gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment called the GTAA. The GTAA 2021 provides an update to the 2019 version and sets out the latest position. The report sets out the council's position on need and supply. The council are 3 pitches short of meeting its overall requirement in the short term. These proposed pitches would therefore make a significant contribution in meeting the short-term need. Whilst the site benefits from a previous permission, the stable block and landscaping has been carried out, therefore this permission has been implemented. Whilst the existing lawful use of the site is agricultural equestrian, due to the nature of the site with little built development, it is still considered to be greenfield land and therefore does not meet the MPPF definition of previously developed land. The policy objective is to make effective use of previous developed land, and it offers little weight in this instance. Previously, the land has been overgrown and subject to illegal dumping of waste. Whilst this has now been removed, which has resulted in a visual improvement of the land, it is considered that this is given very limited weight and should be when applied to the consideration. In terms of design, it is considered that the layout and orientation of proposed pitches is acceptable, offering a reasonable level of privacy and natural surveillance across the site. The layout of the site also allows for privacy for both plots and good natural surveillance for individual and wider sites, as well as providing suitable amenity for both sites. Due to the location of the proposal and the distance from neighbouring dwellings at over 200 metres, there is not a significant concern on the impact on wider neighbouring amenity. The site is located within flood zone 1, but is adjacent to flood zones 2 and 3 and is within a high risk surface water area and a source protection zone 1 area, as well as being located just north of the River Enborne. The Environment Agency removed the initial objection due to further information being submitted, which was deemed acceptable subject to conditions and additional permits which are applied via the Environment Agency directly. The application has also been supported by an ecological assessment comprising of an extended phase 1 habitat and protected species scoping survey and a bat roost assessment. However, further information was required by the council ecologist. This further information was submitted in February 2024, and this was assessed by the council ecologist, who removed their objection subject to conditions requiring the development to be carried out in accordance with the information submitted. Overall, the application site makes a contribution to the overall supply of gypsy and traveller pitches within the district. The proposal helps to meet the council's short-term need for sites, which carries a significant weight within the planning balance. The design of the site is a significant improvement over the historic land which was used for fly tipping. However, given that this is only very limited weight, as the fly tipping was a criminal activity which the council can take legal action against. However, weight can be attached to sites that are well planned, soft landscaped in such a way as to positively enhance the environment and increase its openness. The design is considered acceptable by providing suitable amenity space with suitable use of soft landscaping, as well as maximising natural surveillance across the site, which helps to contribute to an enhanced sense of place and ownership. This weighs in favour of the proposal. Whilst concerns were raised with ecology, flooding and drainage, further information was submitted, assessed by the relevant consultees and deemed acceptable subject to conditions. Therefore, this again weighs in favour of the proposal. Overall, having regard to the relevant development plan policies and material considerations, it is concluded that the reasons for granting planning permissions significantly and demonstrably outweigh any potential adverse impacts in planning terms. A collection of conditions is recommended that will ensure the development is carried out in a way that is acceptable in planning terms. I will also draw members that some of the conditions have been updated, which are on the sheets in front of you. These have been amended slightly to change the time limit as different to what was in the report. So it changes the time limit to to be completed within 3 months of the date of the decision, if it is recommended, if this was deemed approved. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Chris Garrett, and I presume it's Emborne. We're just listed as is it Emborne Council?
Emborne Parish.
Emborne Parish it is. Okay, thank you. And again, you've got 5 minutes, and we'll notify you after 4 minutes.
Thank you. Considering the 2 previous planning applications for this site, Emborne Parish Council is dismayed at the cynical way in which the applicant and his agents are manipulating and subverting the planning process. We are even more appalled at the recommendation by West Berkshire planners to approve this application, as it totally undermines the integrity of the planning process. The 2 previous applications, which sought to change the land use from agricultural to equine with stables, was a Trojan horse application. The applicant had no intention of bringing horses to the site. He used a stable construction process to hide the fact that he was installing a subterranean cesspit and other work. The Long Jubilee Bank holiday weekend was used to install 2 traveller accommodations. In short, this was a pre-planned and well-executed scheme to circumvent the planning process. A process to which all other residents of Emborne are subject and expected to follow. The planning policy team in their memo has identified a shortfall of 10 traveller pitches in West Berkshire. This is obviously an embarrassment, and it seems that this 2-pitch application is a convenient win for them. Given the evidence so far, I imagine this is another Trojan horse application. We're going to get another 8 caravans arriving in the middle of the night. Our West Berkshire planners going to see this as the perfect solution to their remaining shortfall. Rewarding this kind of sophistry is detrimental to all other genuine and honest planning applicants. What precedent does it set for the future? Furthermore, for the record, the amended flood risk assessment does say that the site is entirely in flood zone 1, But if you read it, it also says that the floodplain encroaches onto the site. The floodplain is surely in flood zone 2 and 3. The site map, figure 3 in the FRA, shows areas coloured turquoise and blue bordering the river within the red line, which I believe are transposed from the Environment Agency maps and show flood zones 2 and 3 within the red line. So why hasn't West Berks insisted on a sequential test? We know there are other applications for travellers' pitches within West Berkshire. Shouldn't these all be compared for flood risk? This site is probably the most flood prone. We're not impressed with the SUDS report produced by the applicant, which is riddled with inconsistencies and contradictions. Will the site allow infiltration of runoff or not? The report says both. Will the bioretention basin, which is to be dug 0.5 metre below the current ground surface, be within the vertical range of the river, flood range of the river? Will it be filled by groundwater? No flood heights are given for the 1 in 1, 1 in 30, 1 in 100-year floods, so we cannot assess whether the bioretention basin is viable all year round. There is no mention anywhere in the documents of the cesspit. Is this installation legal? Do they have a permit to discharge or overflow into the river? In the wider public interest and to preserve the integrity of the planning system, we ask you to please reject this application.
Thank you very much. Questions to the parish council representative? Right, Councillor Hooker.
Thanks very much for that presentation. From a practical point of view, have you experienced flooding of that site off the river onto the road? I mean,
No, not all the way onto the road, no.
But how far across the site have you experienced it?
I don't know.
Pardon?
I don't know. I'm just going with the diagrams in the report, which.
Oh, you've not seen it on that site because it's been levelled a bit, hasn't it? So.
Yeah, it's been changed.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, we now move on to the objectors, and I've got Edward Evely and Alex Pearce. Is that correct? Is it a joint presentation or?
We've agreed that I'll speak.
You've agreed what, 2.5 minutes each?
1.5 for me.
Okay, all right. Well, please proceed. Do you want to be notified at 1.5 minutes?
No, it'll be over.
Okay.
Okay. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. By chance, we arranged an ecological appraisal in March 2022 on a site 398 metres from the land in question prior to repair works on our existing building and prior to the arrival of the items now on the applicant's site. Our surveyor, a chartered environmentalist, wrote, during the survey, species of conservation concern noted on site were amber listed stock dove, wren, song thrush and dunnock, which are listed as a result of national population declines. And the Schedule 1 firecrest was observed in relation to the boundary and appeared to be holding territory overlapping nearby trees. The presence of these birds under 400 metres away seems at odds with the applicant's biodiversity answer given in their application of 2022, which states no under A, protected and priority species. However, the applicant's revised ecological impact assessment lists 33 species of birds within 1 to 2 kilometres of the site. This includes 17 protected species in addition to those listed in our own appraisal. Whilst the permitted stables and horses would usually have little ecological and conservation impact, the change of use to a mobile home, a caravan, 2-day
1 minute 30.
and resident occupants will have a much greater impact on all species of birds and all wildlife. Thank you.
Right, your colleague. You're going to then take the remaining minutes.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of most of Emborne residents regarding this application. I would like to also make it clear that we're not objecting to this application because it is an illegal traveller's site. We are objecting to this application on the basis that it should not be developed at all. This application should fail because it is in the open countryside and a long way from settlement boundary and therefore in an unsustainable location, adjacent to flood zone 2 and 3. And as my colleague said, there appears to be an overlap between the flood zones 2 and 3 and the red line application. Immediately adjacent to the River Emborne with its sensitive ecology, its impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. It's an isolated site which will rely on vehicles to access services and facilities. The site's position within the landscape in terms of its visibility. No information has been provided that details availability, lack of alternative accommodation for the applicants, and no information has been provided as to the applicant's consideration of other sites, and insufficient information has been given as to why this site is preferred to other sites within settlements where the landscape impact is less. An application was submitted last year for a pitch at Mount Pleasant, which was refused in December 23. Officers considered that this development was not supported by the presumption in favour of sustainable development and was refused, interestingly, for all the above mentioned points, which I've just highlighted. The above site at Mount Pleasant and this site are remarkably similar in characteristics and certainly lacks a lot of the same information. So why is this site recommended for approval? Furthermore, it is interesting that the reasons for refusal for the Mount Pleasant application could all be used to refuse this application, but instead the planning officers have relied on the following to recommend it for approval. Makes a contribution to the overall supply of gypsy and traveller pitches. Has this site been assessed against other more suitable locations, which is requirement or planning policy? The fact that the site exists creates an easy win for the council and assists the council in achieving their shortfall. The council have not planned for enough traveller sites, so now appears to rely on retrospective applications to fulfil this need. Another reason for approving it, a significant improvement over that of the historic land use. Is this a reason to approve it? Surely the council should have issued enforcement on the previous owner if there was fly tipping going on. Weight can be attached to the site that are well planned or soft landscaped in such a way as to positively enhance the environment and increase its openness in well planned. The design is considered acceptable, providing suitable amenity space and suitable use for soft landscaping. So in future developments, any kind in the countryside are submitted with a good landscaping scheme, there will be a presumption in favour of development, will there? And ecology, flooding and drainage were material considerations, but further information has now been provided. No mention of the ecology has been destroyed, the flooding, no sequential testing, treatment plant siting and the risk of flooding either. The original planning permission for the stabling of the horses was an obvious means to establish an access and other amenities ready for the siting of the caravans. We understand that there have been no horses stabled on the site. The applicant has now confirmed they intend to bring horses to the site, as confirmed on the site meeting. This will contravene the ecology statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dead on 5 minutes for both of you. Right. Okay. Questions to the objectors. Right. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you very much, both of you. The first speaker mentioned the potential ecological harm resulting from the change of use from stabling and horses being on the site to being a mobile home. I'm not an ecological expert, but can you explain why the ecologist's report that we had before us, it says approved. So what exactly is the additional ecological harm that you fear would result from the change?
The surveyor that the applicant used visited the site once on an autumn.
Can you switch? Is it on? If you come close to the mic, okay, please.
The surveyor used for the ecological assessment by the applicant visited the site on one autumn afternoon and recorded no protected species on site. But given that the site is already occupied, that could well have had an effect on the wildlife that could have been there had it not been occupied in contravention of the original planning permission. In other words, if you still had just a stable there and some horses, you might have found the 17 other species that are in their own report listed as being within 1 to 2 kilometres. I mean, birds fly, they can fly away and they can fly back.
Okay, right, Councillor Avashaj.
Thank you, Chair. Just again, questions related to the ecological impact. We've shown and we've not seen the next pumping station, but would it be an impact there if the pumping station doesn't exist at all for the ecological wildlife and all this stuff? So why pick on this site alone for ecological impact?
Well, I'm looking at the chronology and the chance, the happenstance of our survey 398 metres away, which showed that these rare birds were present in March, but apparently, according to the applicant, were not present when they applied in subsequent to June of the same year. But on wisely pressing by this council's ecologist to do more surveying work, although on that one autumn afternoon, they found no birds on the actual site. Their own report says there are 17 protected species within 1 to 2 kilometres. So, as I said to your colleague, those birds may well have been there prior to the arrival of the items that are now on site, in contravention of the original permission just to have stables and horses. So that they may well have been there, but if you contravene the rules, who knows? Birds fly away, birds come back, if they feel happy to come back. And I don't think the pumping station had that effect on them.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Any further questions at all? No? Okay, you can. Right, we now move on to the applicant agent, Peter Brownjohn. Is that correct? Okay, over to you, sir.
I'd like to thank the Chair and fellow members of the committee for allowing me to speak this evening on behalf of the applicant. As you're aware from the submissions, the application seeks planning permission for a 2-pitch gypsy traveller site comprising 2 static caravans, which are occupied akin to dwellings, 2 touring caravans, which are stored on site and taken from the site during periods of travelling for economic purposes, and 2 day rooms, which are purely ancillary to the residential use, akin to an outbuilding for a dwelling. As you will be aware from the officer's report, the development of this site is considered to comply with the policies of the West Berkshire Development Plan, the emerging policies of the Local Plan Review, and the relevant national policies, such that it is considered acceptable in principle. The creation of a further 2 pitches for gypsies and travellers within the district is also recognised as a material benefit of the development. I would add to this that the provision of 2 pitches for the applicant group is also a material benefit, given that without the site, they would be leading a roadside existence. Early in the application, the applicant group the circumstances of the applicant group were disclosed to the officer, and it is pertinent to note that without this site, both households would be leading a roadside existence with no available alternative sites, and at present, no available alternative sites within the district. Were members inclined to conclude contrary to the officer, your objections might be overcome by having regard to the personal circumstances and conditioning the permission to the applicant group. This would facilitate continued access to healthcare and education to the children occupying the site. The alternative might be a temporary permission, noting the accepted shortfall in supply of sites in the district, the lack of readily available alternatives, coupled with the ongoing work on the emerging local plan review. A temporary permission would serve to remedy the breach of planning control without displacing the family and interfering with human rights, and would also offer time for the council to work towards providing what they consider more appropriate sites. Since this application was submitted in August 2022, a number of external consultant reports have been produced in response to the various objections that were raised, both by the council and by the interested parties. These efforts have allowed for matters relating to ecology and drainage to be addressed, with the officer suggesting a number of conditions to be complied with. And it is important for me to note that no objection is made to these conditions. I would also note that whilst the application was submitted prior to the mandatory requirement to achieve biodiversity net gain of 10% on the site, the development has been identified as being capable of achieving a 10.43% net gain, which is a modest excess in it on top of the 10%, and is a gain beyond what was required by the council's ecologist of 1%. With regards to the retrospective nature of the application and objections related, Section 73A of the Act exists to provide for such an occurrence. The Act does allow for the grant of retrospective permission. It shouldn't simply be refused because it is retrospective, and particularly when it is considered to be policy compliant and controllable by conditions. The alternative is to leave it simply unauthorised and left at an appeal stage. The development seeks planning permission for a modest scale two-pitch site accompanied by the pre-existing equestrian development. As identified by the officer, it's of a design and layout which is found to have no policy conflict and to be acceptable. The development would serve to provide two pitches towards meeting the LPA's identified need, while also meeting the personal needs of the applicant group. It is therefore requested that the members uphold the recommendation of the planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, right. Councillor Vickers.
Yes, me again. Thank you, Mr. Brown John. It's always good to hear from a planning consultant who obviously knows about the special situation of this, the traveller and gypsy community. You've referred to the retrospective nature, and it is more often than not, in my experience, that these come to us as retrospective applications, and more often than not, in fact, probably almost, in fact, I would like your expert knowledge on this, that these sorts of applications are in open countryside outside of settlement, but because that's the nature of the lifestyle of this community. So would you, would you like to confirm that and perhaps expand on why that should be the case?
Yes, it's recognised in central government's planning policy for traveller sites that, in fairness, the location of gypsy and traveller sites will be outside of settlement boundaries, predominantly because of land prices. In our experience, land inside of settlements goes for housing and at costs for housing. Land outside of settlements is more affordable to small households, which gypsies and travellers tend to be, who invest their entire life savings into purchasing sites and getting planning permission.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brown John, for the update. You mentioned that from Councillor Vickers' point, continuing from that, you mentioned it's retrospective, but I think you failed to mention that retrospective for an unauthorized one. Yeah, so that's mentioned in the report, so we'll have to consider. My question to you is, it's a rhetorical or more of a presumptive question, but I just want to understand your answers on this. During the site visit, we understood that the site land is owned by the applicant. Yes. So if the land is owned by the applicant, why was it that this unauthorized dwelling or whatever this is being with the notice was not thought of to apply for an planning permission or an application put to us instead of this application? The application could have been a proper application to build these two sites. Yeah, so I'm just not sure, and based on your answers, we could debate on that one as well, so to see how we can take this forward.
So in my experience, members of the travelling community will lead a roadside existence when they're single or when they have a very young family. It's when the children become school age that they become quite in need of accommodation and a settled base to provide that. I believe at the time, Mr. Doherty and his children were quite a young family when he first got the land. And it wasn't relevant at that time, basically.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question relating to this particular application, but may I ask, is your specialty dealing with the travelling community and applications of this nature? Thanks.
I am predominantly working in the traveller with the traveller community. Yes.
Okay. No other further questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we've got a written statement from the third ward member, I believe, and Councillor Vickers, will you be reading this out?
Assuming Councillor.
He's okay.
Yeah, there he is there. So I'm only reading it out in the event that he couldn't join us.
Right. Okay. Councillor Beddyworth, it's your chance to read through the documents, which I think you'd already sent over to Councillor Vickers. Right, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chairman. And I did just make it back in time. So thank you for that. Thank you for my ward members, colleagues rather, for agreeing to step in for me. I'm just pulling up the words that I've written. Here we go. It won't take 5 minutes, Chairman, so I wouldn't bother with your watch. Here we go. When the applicant was applying for change of use of the site previously to equestrian use some 4 years ago, I deliberately used the term Trojan horse. This, it seems, has been borne out, and residents' long-held fears have been realised. When the low loaders arrived with two prefabs on a well-timed delivery to the site a couple of years later, the first day of Her Late Majesty's 4-day Platinum Jubilee weekend, the people of Embourne were left wondering how the applicant could thumb his nose so blatantly at the local planning authority. The meeting 4 years ago resolved to refuse planning permission, stating that the proposed works would result in an overdevelopment and intensification of the use of the existing field, which would have a negative impact on the character and appearance of the area. I'm quoting from the minutes there. I fail to see how this development, larger than originally proposed, is now deemed to be acceptable. The retrospective nature of this application gives the impression that the council is ceding responsibility for site allocation to gypsies and travellers themselves, and this sets a dangerous precedent. In addition to this, we have a backlog in processing planning applications in this authority, which I'm sure you, Chairman, and all the members of Western Area Planning Committee are aware. And this sends the message that all you have to do is go ahead and do whatever you want and please yourself. In section 6 of Ms. Kirby's report, Planning, Balance and Conclusion, and Cheyenne, I have the utmost respect for you as a planning officer. I believe that in this case, that too much weight has been placed in favour of the development and not enough given to the fact that the application is outside of the settlement boundary, that the design is not in keeping with its surrounds, and it's an overdevelopment of the site. This, as I've said, both in the committee, sitting around the benches or making an address as a ward member, this is a plan-led authority, and we have a responsibility to the residents of Embourne as well as to the wider district to comply with policy, and in this instance, I believe to refuse planning permission this evening. There are a couple of points, if I may, Chairman, that the agent for the applicant brought up. And one of those, so I'm just bear with me, I'm going through my notes here. He mentioned that this could possibly be a temporary arrangement. This, I'm not sure how that would work in reality, but perhaps when it comes to debate, that's something that members may like to consider. And also there was another point, was mentioned that the applicant's children were not of school age when the land was purchased. Well, when we were told the previous application some 4 years ago that at 6 and 8 years old they were happy to be riding their ponies up and down the road, and presumably at that stage of the game they were of schooling age already.
1 minute remaining.
I'm not sure that holds water. That's me done, Chairman. Happy to take questions should they be forthcoming.
Thank you, Councillor Bennyworth. Questions of members to Councillor Bennyworth? No. I think you got off lightly, Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for accommodating me.
Yes. Okay, right. Now, members, questions to officers. Councillor Wollaston.
This clearly, I think we all probably dislike retrospective applications. But my concern here, it relates to the need for West Berkshire Council. Now, I'm very conscious of that. We have 17 sites on Four Houses Corner. We've also had in my ward in Lambourne a similar sort of operation where someone just got in and built and then tried to get consent. I believe other ward members have had the same issue, and clearly we've had Lawrence's Lane as well. So I really want to get a grip more on just what the real need is in West Berkshire and how it could otherwise be addressed.
You want to address that, Bob?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. Members, on page 64 of your report, you have a table setting out the need. As you'll be aware, part of our responsibility as a planning authority is to deliver on the identified needs for development in our district. And obviously this includes gypsy and traveller provision. That has so at the moment, there's an explanation in there about a recent change to how 5-year supply is looked at, because essentially there's been a recent court judgment that has defined that. And the short answer is we have a need of 3 in the short term when you look at the overall cultural need and what was the original policy need. So that is what we need to be looking to deliver. That's not that obviously needs to be taken into account as a significant consideration in your deliberations. Yes. Longer term, we will have a need of 17 pitches. That's looking at the next plan period. But yeah, at the moment, there is a shortfall of 3. And because there's a shortfall, obviously that does weigh significantly in the balance. Does that answer your, in terms of what else has been done? Obviously, we do have allocated sites. We have one site as a council that we own, Four Houses Corner, that you mentioned, that's been redeveloped to maximise the use of that existing site, but they've managed to add an additional pitch to that. And part of the plan making process is to try and go out, call for sites and encourage plan the development. But this is where we are based on the current plan at the moment.
Just so I'm clear, that there is an immediate requirement for 3, is it?
Yeah, short term in the 5-year.
Within 5 years?
Yeah.
Not immediate?
Now there is, it applies now that there is a need to
over the next 5 years.
Yes, but we have to at all times maintain at least a 5-year supply looking forward. So we don't have that now, if that makes sense. It's not that we have 5 years to find that.
Could I follow up, Chairman?
Wait a minute, sorry, before I bring you in, Councillor Dick, do you want to make any other observations? You're okay, right, Councillor Dick.
Sorry, I thought you were waving at me. I apologise. Just following up on my colleague's question, I'm not sure you did answer it, because part of the question was, what's the council doing actively to fill this gap? I didn't hear anything active.
Obviously,
maybe I missed it.
No, my planning policy colleagues are obviously, through the local plan, have done a call for sites to see if they can allocate sites. There was only one proposed, which was one came forward, which was Mount Pleasant, which was the other site referred to, which has been deemed unacceptable on its merits. So that was the latest attempt. Obviously, they will continue that process continues all the time. The council, as like I said, has also looked at maximising what it has under it in its own assets with Four Houses Corner. So yes, that's as much as I can really say on that front, I think.
Okay, just come back on that quickly. So did you ever consider the site we're looking at today?
This site, to my understanding, hasn't been promoted as part of the local plan process.
And then Councillor Orange.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, could I ask Mr. Dray, being relatively new to this planning committee, could I ask, in your experience, is it difficult to get planning approval for traveller sites? Are there lots of objections, and do you, as an authority, find it quite difficult and challenging to get these approved? Thanks.
It's hard to comment in general terms in that respect, I think. No, I mean, ultimately, we're here to assess the applications before us. Obviously, like I explained what we do in terms of strategic planning to try and make land available, but like all development, it's guided by the industry bringing it forward, if you like. So,
Yeah, thank you for my colleagues, and thank you for that answer. Clear.
Okay, right, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, a question to Mr. Dre. In section 1.4, it says a temporary stop notice was served on the site on the 6th June 2022. I think immediately after the site was occupied. Can we know what is the current status of that stop notice, and is there any enforcement being carried out at the site?
Temporary stop notices are temporary. It's an initial reaction. There's an enforcement notice that was served. There is no enforcement action on the site at the moment, pending the outcome of this application.
Sorry, I'm not able to understand. So you are suggesting that the outcome of this application would be used to enforce?
If this application is refused, then the next step will be looking at the expediency of issuing an enforcement notice. And what would usually happen is that would be issued alongside a refusal, and then if there was an appeal, they could both be considered together.
Okay.
At the moment, there is no enforcement notice in place.
There's no enforcement, but
pending the outcome of this application.
But for the record, for this meeting, for us to consider, Mr. Trey, you're suggesting that there will be an enforcement initiated if we presumably refuse.
We have to proceed to look at the expediency of it, but that would be the next step in the process.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, one supplementary question to follow up Mr. Councillor Dick's point. Thanks, Mr. Trey. You answered that this is not part of the district authority's plan for traveller side, but counter point, our question is that would it be now considered, if there is no application like this, would it be now considered this site as a proposed prospective site?
Thank you. I think to answer that, it's not an allocated site, but we do have in the current plan a policy which is permissive and says that gypsy and traveller sites in the countryside will be permitted where they fulfil certain criteria. So that's the policy CS7 that we set out in the report. I think I do need to make clear that unlike where housing you have a presumption against new residential development in the countryside, it's not the same policies for gypsy and travellers. The policy says that they will be considered where it meets these criteria, which is obviously what we've assessed. And that's consistent with national policy that was alluded to earlier by an earlier speaker, recognising that these developments do typically happen in rural areas. It's national policy to try and avoid sites which are very isolated because for sustainability reasons, but also in terms of inclusion into society. And on that front, we don't consider it isolated, having regard to other appeal decisions that we've had in recent times. So members might know of the Ernan Street one, for example, where that was a reason for refusal but wasn't upheld. And that was obviously a substantially further distance away from a settlement. So I think it's important to make that clear that whilst it's not allocated, that doesn't mean it's contrary to policy. We have a permissive policy, which obviously we've assessed and is before members to consider.
So what I'm understanding, while it is unauthorized, it's not illegal in the sense it's not contravening any policies of the.
It is not an offence. It is only an offence to not comply with a future enforcement notice. Okay. And members will recall, obviously, we normally you can't treat a retrospective application differently. That's part of the integrity, that it's not a punitive or rewarding system. You have to look at it just as you would if it was purely on paper.
Thank you, Jay. Mr. Jay, I think that clarifies.
Councillor Gaines.
A question for Mr. Dre again. Notwithstanding what you've just been talking about with the gypsy and traveller sites, the agent did mention while he was talking about limiting the two pitches to a particular family or group of families. That I don't think we can do in conditions, can we?
Technically you can, but you need to have a good planning reason too. So you should only put a planning condition on if it's necessary to grant permission. So if the committee deem that it's acceptable on its merits, not taking into account the personal circumstances that you've heard, then you should grant permission irrespective. If you think that the personal circumstances unique to that applicant justify purely for them a personal permission, then that is something we can entertain. Normally we advise against that, but because of the personal circumstances that can come into play, it's okay. And then the other point that mentioned about temporary permission, again, if you think it's unacceptable, that obviously would allow an opportunity to find an alternative location. So it is these are conditions that do occasionally get applied to gypsy and traveller sites, but I would first focus on the merits as they stand. Thank you.
I just wanted to get that point clarified. Thank you.
Any further comments? Right, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions to Mr. Dre, please. We were told that this site was used as a tip. Is there any land remediation work being done, samples taken, for example, heavy metals, asbestos, before this site was actually developed? I am concerned.
No, thanks, Councillor. It was more for fly tipping. When I visited the site previously for our previous applications, it appeared to be more household rubbish. It didn't appear to be anything of hazardous waste or anything like that. And this scale didn't lead to the requirement of a contamination condition. And since then, the site has been removed of all rubbish or fly tipping.
I'm sure as a chairman will know, land remediation and clearance is something that we've done over many years. And with all due respect to the planning officer, I don't think he's actually an expert in heavy metals or identifying asbestos fibres. So it might be a condition, I think, to look, but maybe some further work is done on that site before we go forward with it. Bring that up later. I was very impressed, I must admit, Mr. Dre, with the presentation from the parish council, and the word Trojan horse was used. And I do feel that this is a Trojan horse. We've got these two accommodations on this site, and to ease it through our process, we've now got the two sites for caravans or whatever. If we cast our mind back to the alpaca farm a little while back, which was a temporary building, there was a business case, and then it was a temporary condition. This is a little, I would think, a in-family business arrangement, of which a concern may be that we've got this application for two vans or whatever that may not be taken up. Hence, I go down to the fact that if we got two concrete slabs there or whatever with no caravans on it, therefore this is a null and void application. It fills the slot for two vans for us. But does that put an argument that maybe this ought to be a temporary accommodation or a temporary condition until such time as it is established? That was my questions. Maybe you'd enlighten me.
Well, I think all I can really say.
First one, I think, is land remediation and additional sampling. I am concerned with that.
Okay.
Especially if children are going to be on that site.
I mean, usually when we look at contaminated land, you're looking at former land uses. So land.
I'm thinking of Poorhouse Corners, how much it costs to clear that up.
So on that basis, what's before us so far, we haven't deemed to give us significant concern that there would be contaminated land present. If members disagree with that, then you may what we could do, if you are sure, is beg pardon. If members believe there is enough evidence based on what you've heard of the previous use of the site, then it would be you could consider a condition. I would have to suggest. Yeah. And sorry.
With regard to the business case of whether or not actually it'll ever be used with two vans or whatever, and we go back to the status quo we're in now, where we've got the plan and application approved. We're all go forward, but in fact no sites are taken up. So I go back then to whether a temporary condition should go until such times as possibly it proves that it is going to be used for what the application is for.
I think. Correct me. Sorry if I misunderstand your question. Sure, correct me. If it's concerned about there being more than two pitches, then we obviously need to assess the application before us. If
my concern is that two pitches may not be used. What is the proof they're going to be used? And therefore, this application is for two vans on this site. But if they don't going back to the alpaca, but the house went on there as a sort of a business plan that it had to be successful, and then we reassessed it for full planning permission after a while. We've got no proof that these two vans are going to turn up.
I'm sorry if I'm missing the point here. Ultimately, it's two pitches that are being proposed. Obviously, it's retrospective, so they're currently occupied, albeit in a different layout to what will come. I'm sorry, I'm not grasping the question.
Chairman, isn't that the point, that what we're asked to approve tonight is such a different layout that one could argue that although it's a retrospective application for what's there, it's not a retrospective application. It's so sufficiently different that it's not been implemented. And therefore, whereas normally it would lapse after a certain period automatically because it's not implemented, are we saying that this has been implemented, in which case effectively, until it's occupied, nothing's happened?
On that front, I can say no, it's a retrospective planning application because the change of use has occurred, although it is being proposed that the layout will change. So that's why you'll see the conditions on the update report require those remedial works to change it to the approved layout potentially to match with that. So on that front, no, it is a retrospective application because the part of the development has taken place, but there is stuff to continue.
Follow up on the applicant's agent did actually suggest a temporary permission. Is that the fact that it comes from the applicant through his agent sufficient reason for us to actually accept that? Because you implied that there has to be some other reason.
I think what they obviously, I'm sure the applicants would wish for it to be a permanent permission, and that's what the proposal is. What they're saying is if taking it all into account, you deem it is unacceptable, these alternatives that you could consider.
In other words, we should set aside the fact that he suggested it.
Yeah, as you're aware, where applications are, you can take it into account, but you should only put on a condition if you consider it necessary. So you only should say a temporary consent is required if you think that it is otherwise unacceptable, but you're willing to tolerate that harm for a bit of time in order to find a new location. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Okay, right, Councillor Amaraj, is that following up from that?
Yes, sorry, Chairman, I need to ask this question for my own clarity as well. It's a technical question to Mr. Dre. Could I assume or take it that this retrospective, because there's a lot of mention about retrospective application, it is similar to the application like a certificate of lawfulness, or they completely different?
No, completely different. The certificate of lawfulness is looking to confirm whether a use is lawful, for example, immune from enforcement due to the passage of time. My advice would be to focus purely on this application just as if it was on paper before you.
Well, members, sorry, Sir Williston, apologies.
Sorry, can I just be clear? Are these two existing buildings occupied?
Yes.
Because when we did the inspection, I didn't see anybody else there or any other vehicles.
That's why they asked the question.
Our information is yes.
I will clarify, there were people in the caravans when we were on site. I think they were just hiding because I was taking further site photos. So I think they just didn't want to be in the photos, but there were other people out on site, or they might have been at work, etc. That would be for the applicant, but I did see a couple of people around, but they probably just, like I said, didn't want to be in the site photos that I was taking on site.
Okay, right, members, have we exhausted all the questions of officers? If that being the case, then who's opening the debate?
Chairman,
Right, okay, Councillor Williston and then Councillor Vickers.
I am very uneasy about this. I don't like retrospective applications at all, unless there's a very good reason. I can't see why this is a good reason. It's in the middle of the open countryside, and I do seriously feel the original application for the stables was, as has been mentioned elsewhere, a Trojan horse, and I think we're being taken for idiots, frankly.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Moving around the table, Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm equally uneasy, but I'm uneasy about the whole way in which the system provides or fails to provide in a satisfactory way to the wider community for this particular specialist community, if you like. The whole idea of a call for sites starts by putting all the arguments in the favour of the developer or the landowner. And we've heard that for this community, acquiring the land is really a major investment. It uses up their entire savings generally. And so at the time of a call for sites, they're unlikely to have possession of the land or to even know whether they're ever going to be able to. So it does seem that it's almost automatic that you never have enough sites come forward in the call for sites for gypsy and traveller accommodation to meet the demand. And so the community ends up doing what we've got before us, which is completely unsatisfactory and appears to bring the whole system into disrepute. So I think we need to look at national policy on this, and one way around it might be to use non-planning measures to adjust the land market, I think. And this applies, in fact, across the board, not to just this community, because we don't have any power really as an authority to control what comes forward in a call for sites. That's the problem.
Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Vickers, but there is a process to be taken. This gentleman or the applicant as the land, and he's no different than me, but if he wanted to develop it, he could use the gentleman who's presented his case today in the first instance and apply for full planning permission. And as we're short of these sites, he might well have got it. But here we are now, as Councillor Wollaston says, in a situation where it's just been walked over roughshod. The development has taken place. And now, as we find in a lot of enforcement and retrospective applications, it more than likely will be looked at sympathetically. Enforcement is not one of punishment, it's one of negotiation and coming to a happy medium. And this looks like this could be the happy medium, but that's my view on it.
Noted. Right, Councillor Awsraj.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at this application from the perspective of the words like Trojan horse has been used. I think that's too judgmental in my view, because if you think in that perspective, as Councillor Hooker and Councillor Vickers mentioned, that the applicant wants this land and they are in their freedom to develop this land as they think, and particularly this is traveller site land. So, and are we being too judgmental and becoming too uneasy to the extent that we are traversing in the debate? I'm just feeling that sense in this room that we are looking at this application as an unauthorized one. While it may be in the initial stage, what I'm thinking is that the reason I asked the question for a lot of the unlawfulness, the lawfulness certificate is why a number of householders build something and then they want to make it lawful. And this council looks at it and then consider all aspects. How many times we've seen enforcement resulted in a complete demolition of something? Is it rare? Is it not rare? And how uneasy we are at that point. So as Councillor Lucas said, it's more of a negotiation and then see that what's the best interest. And we should look at this application in what the best interest of the travellers community, the children, and then the occupants and their access to healthcare and all the other services. While I'm being sympathetic to the parish council view that this has come out of all of a sudden during their holiday time, and no one expected it and no one had the time to intervene in it, and even council didn't have the time to intervene in it. But the summary is, as officers have confirmed, this site, the application for the development of this site is lawful if it would have come up as a normal application in the applicant's own land. So I'm thinking that we should, with all the inputs, I think we should approve this site because this is somewhat lawful. And then the Trojan part would come in when we can put some conditions to ensure that the applicants are going to use this and develop this site according to the letter of this application, not one removed or one added to this. So that is where we as a council, as a committee, must ensure for the fairness of other residents of this district and then particularly parish council, that we enforce the conditions to the letter of this application to the every degree possible and enforce it and not allow this to develop into some other site. That's my view.
Okay, thank you. I've got two other speakers that wish. In fact, I've got three speakers now. So Councillor Dick, Councillor Foot, and then the Councillor Gaines.
Thank you, Chairman. We shouldn't be talking about national policy and railing against windmills. That's not what we're here for. We shouldn't talk about other cases. That's not what we're here for. I would say this application is cynical. No question about it, cynical. But we've heard from officers quite rightly that, and the public don't generally realise this, that there is no punishment for retrospective applications. Now, that's a fault, if you like, somewhere else, but we can't do that. And we need to note the need for all aspects of the community. We also hear that enforcement, the allegation is that it's weak, and officers need to hear that and think about it. On the other side, it's outside the settlement boundary. It was a bit shocking to me to arrive there and see what was there. So, and there's more to come. So it looks like overdevelopment to me. As we constantly hear from planners, it's about weighing those competing interests up. So I find this very difficult. What does appeal to me is a temporary, if we must grant it, temporary one, because we're saying that isn't suitable for all the reasons we've heard from residents, etc. But let's give people a bit of respite there temporarily until such times as they find somewhere better. That's where I am, if that helps, or even if it doesn't.
Okay, well, thanks for your observations and your comments there. Right, okay, Councillor Foot.
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, just briefly, I too really dislike retrospective planning applications, but I've learnt a lot tonight listening to this application, and I'm really sorry I wasn't able to go on the site visit, so I hold my hand up for that. But I think this puts us in a difficult position as a council, pardon me, as a council. But as has been said, we have to consider the application before us as if it's a new application. It's also very striking to me that it's probably exceptionally difficult for the travelling community to get permission for sites anywhere. And that group are, there are protected characteristics. And it seems to me that, we've heard a lot of Trojan horse tonight. Perhaps it was the only way they felt they could get a site. I think, again, the point has been made that the council, this is in a way a little bit of a windfall for them because it's potentially an additional site for travellers that was not in the local plan. But again, I think that would be very unfair to the council officers, really. And also I have sympathy for the residents in Enbourne or adjacent to this site, because again, it's a retrospective application. But my feeling is that considering the application as it stands before us, I would be happy to accept it. Thank you.
So new views the word accepts, but can I push you a bit further? Is that a formal proposal?
Yes, Chair, I'd be happy to formally propose that.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Gaines.
Actually, most of what I was going to say has actually been said, so I don't think I'll keep this discussion going. Thanks.
Okay. Right, Councillor Vickers.
I'm happy to second it because I think we've heard all the points, and from the other side, I think I agree that there's been negotiation, and this is probably an acceptable compromise, and I think we should go with it on the basis of the officer's report, which I think was excellent.
Okay, right, Councillor Hooker.
I think for the benefit of the applicant, when I went to the site, I don't know about the other members, I was very impressed with it. It was clean, it was tidy, it was well laid out, the curtilage was good, the security was good, and it was exceptionally clean. It's a great shame it wasn't done properly, but otherwise it was, I thought, impeccable.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in response to that comment, Councillor Hooker, I didn't recognise the site this time around compared with the previous times, though, I must admit. Sorry, another member, sorry, Councillor Amaraj.
Chairman, I'm just going to add that one as well. Sorry, I forgot. When we visited the site, the parking arrangements were good. I think the traffic and then the parking arrangements would be better, considering that what it would have been like used for fly tipping, causing nuisance. But that's not considered now. But I also concur that when we visited, it was properly managed.
Right, the proposer and seconder, do we need to address any particular issues which relate to conditions?
I'd just like the committee's views on whether or not there should be some sort of land test done on heavy metals and asbestos and the like. I'm not comfortable as it was used as a fly tipping site that there's not something there we don't know about. But
as the seconder, I personally don't think, having listened to Mr. Dre, that because it's not as if it was had a different previous use. I mean, anywhere can get fly tipping, and you know, to my mind, there's particularly on the area that's going to be occupied by the families. I don't think it's sufficient. And we also touched on the temporary permission. I don't think we've got grounds to ask for a temporary permission. I think we should get on and give the applicant some comfort that, you know, they've got security of tenure for their children's education, etc.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Hooker again.
I'll come back to Councillor Vickers on that. I remember going to that site 4 years ago, and it was one hell of a mess. I mean, this stuff was piled up. I could not actually identify what was there. It was quite a considerable site, and I'm just concerned that if something is found or something, somebody catches something or whatever, whether repercussions will come back to the council hasn't done due diligence on that land. I just put it to us, looking after our own, safeguarding our own interests as a council.
Did you want? Yeah, no, Councillor Williston, I think you had your hand up, didn't you? Yeah, Councillor Williston was next.
I remain uneasy about this, but what concerns me even more, this is a large plot, and I would hate to see this suddenly becoming 8 plots. So I want to see a very strong condition that no further development beyond the 2.
Chairman, if I may, there are conditions. Condition 8 is about the maximum pitch. Condition 9 about the occupancy restriction to only Egyptian travellers, and condition 10 that the day rooms are ancillary, i.e. part of those pitches.
Okay.
Okay. Are you? Not really. No. Not really. Okay. Councillor Gaines.
Can we actually put a condition in about to look at the land? Because if we can, I'm happy to second Councillor Williston. Sorry, Councillor Hooker's concerns.
I think members, you've obviously heard about. We look at previous uses normally, and obviously it was open land before. But you've heard. I think you have heard about previous activity on the land. So I've got no objection if you want to put a condition on. I would suggest within words along the lines of within 3 months of the date of this decision, there's an investigation that takes place and the report submitted to us for approval, and thereafter any remediation work is carried out in accordance with an agreed programme.
I can see you nodding, Councillor Vickers. What about Councillor Foot? You're happy with that? Okay. All right. Okay. So condition.
So, Chairman, I've noted the proposals in accordance with officer recommendation with an additional condition regarding contaminated land, as I've just described.
Condition. Do I put to the vote? Nothing else to be mentioned? Okay. All those in favour, please. Show. Against? Okay.
Chairman, I would propose that. I've got my sustenance to
Okay.
last me through the, 4 hours without any sustenance is a bit much.
Sorry, if
5
we,
minutes?
we say 5 minutes,
5 minutes.
we might get through the next
I think we
application
might,
before
but-
10 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to need to go beyond 10, but there we go.
I just point out, Chairman, that that's twice. 3 strikes.
To item 4, third application, 23/01100 stroke reserve matters are MAJ Newbury Racecourse and Newbury Racecourse Road. I'm going to formally invite Jake Brown to introduce this application. And is Gareth still on the phone? On the line?
Oh, most definitely, Mr. Chairman, yes.
You are, okay, because I think this time we might need to involve you. So I just wanted to make absolutely certain. But anyway, over to you, Jake.
This application seeks approval of the reserve matters as part of the eastern area parcel of the Newbury Racecourse.
Put your mic on.
Did that work? Yes. This application seeks approval of reserve matters for part of the eastern area parcel of the Newbury Racecourse strategic site allocation, which has been granted outline planning permission for the development of up to 1,500 dwellings, together with new and enhanced leisure, racing, administrative and visitor facilities and other associated development. For context, this is the original master plan approved under the outline planning permission. Development of the Newbury Racecourse strategic site was split into 3 parcels: the western area parcel, the central area parcel, and the eastern area parcel. The western and central area parcels have been developed by the applicant and are built out and occupied. This plan shows the previous reserve matters granted approval under the 2014 reserve matters application for part of the eastern area parcel. Previous reserve matters applications, as detailed in the planning history section of the agenda report, have been approved for the development of 713 dwellings across the entire eastern area parcel, most of which has been constructed and is occupied. Members will note the layout of the apartment blocks, parking areas, roads, including the access road to the coach park for coaches that has previously been approved and represents a fallback position for the applicant. The scale of the apartment blocks approved in the previous reserve matters applications are detailed in paragraph 1.10 of the agenda report and ranged from 8 to 4 stories, examples of which are shown here. 8 stories for block A3 in the location of block B1 in this current application, 6 stories for block A4, now in the location of block A2 in this current application, and block A7, shown here and referred to in the current application as block G, was approved as a height of 7 stories. This alternative proposal for this part of the eastern area parcel would reduce the total amount of dwellings in the eastern area from 713 to 597, and the total number of dwellings across the whole of the Newbury Racecourse development from 1,500 to 1,384. The applicants advise that the primary aim of this new application is to reduce the previously approved block heights down to 4 stories, to utilise a more sustainable timber frame build to the proposed apartment blocks, as well as removing undercroft parking and replacing with ground floor residential units, and reducing and amending the previously approved commercial floor space to reflect modern market demand. This application has been brought to committee for determination as it has received 10 objections. and the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions proposed in section 8 of the agenda report. Here we have a view of the proposed location of Block G looking southwest. A view of the location of Block D looking north. A view of the existing access road leading to the coach park north of the application site. You can see the entrance to the car park in the background. View of Block A1 location looking north. View of Block A2 and B1 location, again looking north, with the bridge in the background. And then a view of the application site from the bridge, looking southeast. As set out in the update report, the bridge underpass falls outside of this application site, and the bridge design, including the use of the underpass for pedestrians and cyclists only, was granted permission under a planning application submitted in 2006. It is not used for the movement of coaches to the coach park on the eastern side of the bridge. Members will note the photo of the underpass here and the sign indicating pedestrian access to the coach park. Race day access was granted under the outline planning permission, as shown here in dashed blue line on the extract of the approved race day movements plan, and included coach movements over the bridge from Hanbridge Road onto Home Straight eastwards and north to the coach parking area. The proposed use of the road by coaches from Home Straight Road between the apartment blocks and into the coach park was accepted in previous reserve matters approvals and represents a fallback position for the applicants, which has significant weight in the determination of this application. The principle of the development was established in the original outline planning permission. Whilst there would be an increase in surface parking from that previously approved, the scale, layout and appearance now proposed is not considered to result in a significant harmful impact upon the character and appearance of the area, and when weighed against the benefits of the proposal through increased active frontages, is considered on balance acceptable. Whilst consultees have raised concerns regarding the landscaping proposed as set out in the agenda report, landscaping is controlled by conditions 19 and 20 attached to the outline planning permission. Therefore, it is considered that suitable landscaping can be achieved through a future application to be submitted for consideration by the local planning authority to approve the precise location, type, density, management and maintenance of soft landscaping. The apartment blocks proposed in this application are in approximately the same location as the apartment blocks previously approved. The separation distances between the blocks proposed, together with the appearances proposed, would not give rise to any significant impact on neighbouring amenity. Construction impacts are controlled by conditions attached to the outline planning permission to mitigate any impact on neighbouring amenity. Conditions proposed in section 8 of the agenda report relating to noise mitigation, together with the conditions attached to the outline planning permission, are also considered to adequately safeguard the amenity of future occupiers. Policy C2 of the core strategy identifies that appropriate retail facilities will be provided as part of the development at the Newbury Racecourse strategic site. Policy CS11 of the core strategy notes that small amounts of new retail floor space may be provided in the form of a new local centre at the racecourse in Newbury to respond to local needs in this area. The applicant has engaged with the local commercial agent with regards to the local centre, specifically in respect of the scale and uses that could be offered, given the location of the local centre, which is not on a main road that is open to general passing traffic. As such, the retail provision would most likely be used by residents of the development rather than by customers from further afield. Therefore, the applicant considers that the customer potential will likely justify a shopping in this location, such as a small retailer or convenience store located within the proposed unit at the eastern side of Block A1, labelled Local Centre 4 here. The use of this unit for retail only is proposed to be secured by condition as set out in section 8 of the agenda report. The remaining commercial floor space is subdivided into 3 smaller units, which may be suited to other operators such as healthcare, dental, physiotherapy or hair salon. In addition, the applicant has advised that local residents would be keen for a cafe coffee shop in the local centre, and Newbury Town Council have raised the possibility of a community facility. All of the proposed potential uses for the remaining 3 local centre units are considered to represent suitable local centre uses that would benefit the residents of the Newbury Racecourse site and can be conditioned as such as proposed in section 8 of the agenda report to enable the flexible use of those units. Therefore, the reduced provision of commercial floor space is not considered to run contrary to policy CS2 or CS11 or the core strategy, and is considered to be sufficient to serve the development at Newbury Racecourse. In respect of affordable housing, the western and central parcels of the Newbury Racecourse development have been constructed and are occupied. They provide 127 and 110 affordable dwellings respectively, representing a provision of 30.2% and 30.1% respectively of the total dwellings built across each of those phases. This application, if approved, would provide 62 affordable dwellings within the application site, resulting in 173 affordable homes of the 597 total dwellings to be delivered within the eastern parcel as a whole, and 410 affordable homes of the 1,384 to be delivered across the whole Newbury Racecourse site. The resultant affordable housing provision across the whole of the Newbury Racecourse site would be 29.6%. Whilst it is acknowledged that the proportion of the overall affordable housing provision for the whole racecourse development would be slightly less than 30%, it would be greater than the 29.3% specified in the Section 106 agreement attached to the outline planning permission and is confirmed as being acceptable by the Housing Service. This plan shows the proposed parking spaces. As noted in the agenda report, no objections have been raised by the Highways Officer in respect of the number of parking spaces proposed. For reasons set out in the agenda report, the parking provision is considered acceptable. Details relating to drop curves and tactile paving are controlled by conditions attached to the outline planning permission, and details of the electric vehicle charging points are proposed to be secured by condition as set out in section 8 of the agenda report. In respect of travel plan and car club provision, those matters were dealt with at the outline stage. To facilitate this provision, a car club parking space is proposed close to the local centre, off the main road in front of a proposed apartment block D, as shown here in light blue. Therefore, the layout of the proposed development is considered to accord with policy CS 13 and 14 of the core strategy and would not introduce any significant concerns in respect of highway safety. Biodiversity and drainage matters are suitably controlled by conditions attached to the outline planning permission. In respect of open space, which is secured through the planning obligation attached to the outline planning permission, the details proposed in this reserve matters application do not result in the loss of public open space. Taking into account the main issues identified and having regard to the representations made in response to the application consultation, it is concluded that the proposed development complies with national and local planning policy and the benefits of the development outweigh the limited issues identified. It is important to note that the applicant has received previous reserve matters approval for larger apartment blocks than is proposed in this application, and those reserve matters approvals represent a fallback position for the applicant. The development proposed in this reserve matters application is not considered to introduce any significant impacts on that previously approved. As such, members are recommended to grant approval, subject to the conditions proposed in section 8 of the agenda report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jake. Do you wish to add anything to that, Gareth?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, nothing at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. I'm now going to ask Susanna Hyde to come to the rostrum.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. One welcomes the reduction in the stories and the softer design in the fascias, and also going back to the original plan of townhouses behind the crescent. However, my concerns are parking. Although reductions have been made regarding units, 250 dwellings equates to 250 plus parking spaces, as most homes have 2 cars plus. I feel the development will become a congested car park, more pollution and noise. And my other concerns are lack of green spaces and wildlife meadows and play areas for residents. A makeshift meadow had been built to make development attractive, but is going to be destroyed for the erection of Block G, shrubs, mature shrubs and trees destroyed. Looking at the plan, I feel Block G with the 60 car parking spaces will encroach on all the designated green spaces around the area. To conclude, as I said, I welcome the amended design changes. This development, as Jake said, was given planning permission in 2009 for 1,500 dwellings, and a lot has changed. I'm still looking for the community centre and the wildlife meadows. As I stipulated, a green space, a meadow, was created to enhance the attractiveness of the frontage of the developments. But unfortunately, the land has already been designated for a block of flats. This leaves residents with no wildlife meadows, biodiversity or green spaces, with the developers as stipulated on the lovely signage outside the sales office. Very little soft landscaping is going to be created. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps you just stand by the lectern in case there's any, there could be some questions from members. Sorry about that. Right, members, any questions? Councillor Vickers.
Yes, you touched on there being still no community centre. I mean, what would you like to see by way of community facilities?
Really, I suppose you could keep the sales office and turn that into a community hub. As you say, I think at the moment there isn't a sort of a committee, a residents committee, which obviously, hopefully, will be developed in the future. But things like that could be offered lots of things, sort of as a clubhouse, things that residents can go to, be it from any sort of in exercise classes. It's a big development, and possibly it does beg a facility such as a sort of a community hub.
Thank you.
And finally, a question from me. You did mention about play areas. What were you specifically thinking there should be in the area of the various blocks?
Well, I think that you have 2 small play areas. You've got one in the middle of development and you've got one further up. And I think if you've got these dwellings coming in, families moving in, there should be a sort of a nice sort of, area that would be, would welcome a sort of, play area. Or as I said, I've been looking for these meadows. And as I said, what was built, the meadows that was created, but obviously the land was already approved for a block of flats, but it was designed invariably to see so people bought into the development. They say they stipulated, lovely sort of wildlife meadows, and it looks very pretty if you look at the sign outside their sales office with nice, sort of wildflowers. I mean, that isn't going to be the case. And as I said, I also say that the plan of where Block G is going to be, it's got lots of green around it. And I still find it very difficult to comprehend that they're going to get a block of flats of 36 units plus a car park of 60 cars without, as I said, encroaching on the green area around it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you can sit back on your seat. Yes, okay. Right, I now call upon Georgina Mortimer as the agent or representative of David Wilson Homes, I think, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just pop this down. Good evening. This application is made on land forming part of the Newbury Racecourse development within the phase known as the Eastern Area. The site has an extensive planning history and David Wilson Homes are responsible for delivering all of the housing at the development, which is now largely built out with the exception of the western end of the Eastern Area. This phase benefits from an existing detailed planning consent, including 345 apartments and a local centre, along with the rest of the housing in this phase. This application is for an alternative design for 229 apartments and local centre. The application therefore reduces the total number of dwellings proposed by 116 from that previously approved. The primary reason for proposing an alternative scheme is a change in construction method from concrete frame to timber frame, which has been informed by a number of factors: the viability of concrete frame, the improved thermal performance of timber frame, which has been reviewed in detail following recent changes to building regulations, the reduction in construction waste, and the increased speed of build. Our company approach is to construct timber frame buildings up to 4 stories in height, which has led to the reduction in total number of dwellings. The story heights have been reduced, but the overall scale, massing, appearance and layout otherwise follow that previously approved. The quantum of parking per dwelling has increased and is in line with policy P1 of the Housing Site Allocations DPD, which is a newer policy adopted in 2017 since the approval of the previous permission. The principle of development in this location and the means of access have already been established and approved and are not being considered this evening. This application was initially submitted in April last year and included a wider application boundary, including an area previously consented as houses, to instead change to 3 apartment buildings, E1, E2 and F. There were 10 letters of objection from local residents regarding concerns with privacy, density and appearance, and we subsequently held a number of meetings with residents and revised the plans in line with their feedback. It was clear that those blocks should be removed from this application and returned to townhouses, and we have worked with the residents to amend the plans. This revised application was submitted to the council in March, and there has since only been 1 new letter of objection and 1 letter of support from a resident who's removed an earlier objection. Of the 229 homes, 62 will be affordable. The provision remains consistent within the section 106 and the previously approved scheme. The affordable homes will be built to nationally described space standards and are accessible and adaptable dwellings, otherwise known as Part M Category 2. As mentioned previously, the council has adopted a new parking policy since the previous scheme was approved. Therefore, this application provides an increased provision of parking from that previously consented. There is a total of 397 car parking spaces in this application, and each apartment will have 1 allocated space, along with a further 100 unallocated, 49 visitor spaces, 18 spaces for the local centre, and 1 space for the car club. Charging points for electric vehicles will be provided for each apartment, and a condition is proposed to secure the details of this. A local centre is proposed on the ground floor of Block A1, comprising 4 units with a total of 613 square metres. A local centre was included in the description of development on the outline planning consent, and its location on this phase was subsequently agreed by approval of the site-wide phasing plan. The previously approved plans for the eastern area included a larger area of the local centre, and the decision to reduce the total area has been informed by the advice of a local commercial agent on the current market in 2024 and the likely interest in smaller units rather than the 2 large units previously approved. No use classes or floor areas were defined by the outline consent or section 106, therefore the proposals are in accordance with the outline planning permission. Eventual occupants will be established by marketing the spaces following an approval if granted this evening, and a condition is proposed setting out the appropriate use classes, which Jake has touched upon in his presentation. All apartments have their own private balcony, and the open space and amenity provision remains in accordance with that previously approved. The detailed landscaping plans are covered by a condition on the outline consent and will need to be agreed separately with the council. Drainage plans have been submitted and the drainage officer is happy with these in principle, with the full detail to be submitted and approved to discharge a condition on the outline consent. The proposed development is in accordance with the outline planning permission and generally consistent with the previously approved scheme and will provide a high quality final phase to the Newbury Racecourse development. I hope that you will support the officer's recommendation and I'm happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor Gaines first and then Councillor Armraj.
I'm just a little bit concerned, given we're supposed to be looking at active travel, etc., that there's only one space for a car club. Have you had any dealings with the car club? You did mention car club, so I can actually ask that question.
Yeah. Yes. So, sorry, had you finished answering? That was okay. So I suppose in terms of wider sustainable location and active travel, there's not just the car club. I think we have to consider the fact there's the train station and rail connectivity as well as walking and cycling. With the car club specifically, we've paid a contribution to the council who have set up the car club with enterprise in the wider area, specifically to the space that's on Boundary Road to the west of the wider application site. And we've also identified that we'll be offering a car club space on this site, and that's also been informed by in discussion with enterprise. So they've got the statistics on number of residents that have taken up the scheme that are currently living on the development and informed that one space would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Armraj.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, detailed presentation. You mentioned about the local centre on the ground floor. I believe from the officer's report, it's largely commercial nature. It's going to be commercial nature. Given that residents' grievance that there is no community centre in that eastern side, and I think it's true for the entire racecourse development, would you be open to provide some community center in that local center, i.e. what I mean is not having commercial center in one of the ground floor areas and give it to the community whenever that is formed. So would you be open to that idea?
The local centre in itself will be marketed once consent's in place, and there's flexibility with the conditions to allow for that as a use. As a community centre.
Okay, sorry, just clarification, not as a commercial community centre, but a community centre given to the local community, exclusive use of that community. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, I that's not what's set out in the section 106. So no is the answer to the question.
Any further questions? Councillor Dick and then Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. You made something in your presentation, and thank you for it, of social housing. There's a complaint or a concern raised somewhere in the papers from one of the parish councils, I think, about the location. So can you just remind us all very clearly about whether they're grouped in one place, how well spread they are? You understand the question.
Yes, I think that objection and that point was raised on the initial proposals that were submitted last year. The blocks E1, E2 and F that I spoke about that have been removed were identified as social housing. So that was one of the reasons that some objections were raised initially. The locations that they're currently now proposed are in line with what was approved on the previous scheme. So
an answer really. Describe.
Sorry. So they are. We've got one block that's social rented, one block that's wholly shared ownership, and then we've got one block that's a mixed tenure block of private and shared ownership.
That's what I understood. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Public transport. Everyone was microphone. Press the whole. There you go.
Is that better? Thank you. Public transport, it might have been approved on the previous application. These apartments and what have you, obviously on the main drag going through, but is that a bus stop route there?
Yes, it is. That's already in place.
Thank you.
Councillor Hooker, we noted the bus, didn't we, Councillor Vickers, on Monday morning? Right, sorry, Councillor.
On the next after councillor Dick, I thought I heard you say. And
Okay, all
haven't
right, I think
actually
there's
asked
been
it.
2 or 3 hands going up and down, so Councillor.
You had councillor Dick, but you said when you called councillor Dick that I was after him.
Councillor Vickers is feeling neglected.
Yes.
I'm sorry about that, but also, of course, it's not that clear when members keep coming back and forth. That's the problem. Right, Councillor Vickers, carry on.
Promise not to come back and forth, Chairman.
You're absolutely spot on, Councillor Wilson, and I was just mentioned that to the officer only this moment a minute or so ago that I think by 10 to we're going to have to put a proposal forward to move on to after 10 o'clock. Yes, okay, right, thank you. Right, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. Interestingly, you said that the reason why the height's reduced is nothing to do with marketing. Well, you didn't say anything about marketing, although the report seemed to indicate that it was something to do with the change in the housing market. Is that true, that it's only to do with the structural and cost reasons? And actually, in fact, it's far lower carbon footprint with a timber structure and no concrete. So
Yeah, no,
I'm all in favour of that, but it does. You're saying that structural reason is the main reason why we're losing this number of houses.
Yeah, it's sorry.
And also the increase in the amount of land that's being taken up by parking, because obviously in a 4-storey building, if you take away 1 story for parking cars, you've got to put them somewhere else. So
yeah, so it's no, it's not marketing. It's various different reasons that I'd set out, so I can go through them in a bit more detail. The viability of concrete frame, obviously build costs have increased significantly since the approval of the original scheme. And to actually make a concrete frame building viable, it needs to be even taller stories than what we have approved at the moment. So we've considered our options in that scenario and actually re-looked at introducing the timber frame, and then it's got the other benefits of the sustainability credentials as well. But you're right, that does mean that we have taken away the undercroft parking, which is the parking on the ground floor that was previously approved. We've now got ground floor flats, and then the parking is now all external to the buildings. So there is additional hard landscaping to cater for that additional parking, but that doesn't take away from the soft landscaping. Actually, the building footprints have been reduced.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Foot.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Can I ask, obviously, I can't remember what the original sort of application was, but could you tell me a little bit about the heating aspects? You know, for example, are we still looking at sort of gas boilers for this, or are we looking at ground source heat pumps? And obviously we've got a lot of flat roofs here, which would be ideal for solar panels looking to the future. You know, is there any plan to accommodate, you know, more sustainable heating for the flats looking ahead?
Yes, yeah, so you're correct. Some of the earlier phases utilise district heating. They've got district heating plant systems further into different areas of the site. The decision's been made not to take that forward on this scheme due to the changes in builder regulations that came in over the last year or so. So there's a new energy assessment software called SAP 10, which is you have to input all of the data, and what that produced was it showed that district heating doesn't perform as well under the new building regulations. So the decision at the moment, the decision currently is that it will be gas boilers with a combination with PV on the flat roofs as well.
Okay, right, Councillor Hooker.
Chairman, at this juncture, may I propose that we do sit after 10 o'clock? I don't know if that gets a second or not.
No, okay, all in agreement? Yes, okay. We will continue on. And from the chair, I've got a question on disabled parking. There has been a lot of concern on some of the earlier blocks in the space allocated for disabled parking and the lack of space opening doors for really disabled people. can you guarantee that there's going to be adequate space for any disabled to actually get in and out their vehicle in the allotted spots for disabled?
Yes, at the moment, we've definitely, all of the affordable dwellings allow for what is called Building Regulations Part M Category 2. That's adaptable and accessible for wheelchair users in future. So each affordable dwelling has an allocated space that can be used by wheelchair users. In terms of the visitor spaces, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to check that, whether that's something that's been incorporated or whether that's something that could be looked at for some of the local centre spaces, perhaps.
It would be helpful because I do know that some disabled residents in some of the blocks, and Wood Hay block in particular, was a great concern of a couple of residents. Any other questions at all? No? Okay, thanks very much. Right, members, in the list of obviously speakers, we didn't have any representatives from the parish. They were invited. We didn't from the accompanying parish, i.e. Newbury Town Council, and they obviously didn't send anybody. And in relationship to the other two ward members, they felt that it wasn't appropriate to come and speak as well. I've not actually taken up my offer of speaking, basically from the point of view of I felt we had a lot of clarification anyway, but I'm more than willing to open the debate and make a few observations in the debate if you're happy with that. I think if we look at this particular application, it is coming to the end of the period of phases over several years, which many of you have obviously been involved in various guises. And there's been a considerable amount of discussion about how the various phases would be discussed and all the reserve matters which came forward at the appropriate time over that period of time. Now, this particular one, I think we've got to commend the applicant in a certain way because there's been a reduction in the number that was originally proposed. And also, of course, it's also meant that there's been a reduction in height, which is a great impact on the visibility of the site. And that was a great concern of the residents. The issue which has been raised by the objector tonight, I think, is very valid. She's obviously really keen to see is maximise the amount of open space. And I think we're all keen to see the maximum amount of open space in that area of the racecourse. And also concerned that at the end of the day, that adequate parking would be provided, bearing in mind that the parking on some of the earlier, especially the blocks, was very restricted, and it did meant that some of the residents actually moved into this particular area of the site and officially parked. So I think I'm saying as a ward member, I'd like to make sure that the parking is properly monitored, properly used, appropriately used, and it doesn't create a further problem further down the line. But overall, I have to say that I think the scheme is coming to the end of a long period of building for that part of Newbury, east end of the town, before you get obviously to Hambridge Road area. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'm more than welcome this particular planning application. And it might be appropriate for me to propose the application, but I see councillor Vickers' hand going up, and bearing in mind he was one of the first members that actually discussed the phase one, and I think if I remember rightly, well before my time back on the council, his casting vote actually saw the first planning for the phase one. Is that correct, councillor Vickers?
If you're calling me now as the next speaker, I just point out, Chairman, that I know we're short of time, but we haven't had the questions to officers.
Sorry.
I mean, I do think, I don't know whether other members agree, but I'm happy to include some questions to officers in what I've got to say for the purpose of expediency. But yes, I was in fact the person who, although we weren't running the council at the time, I felt this was such a potentially sustainable and, you know, ecologically friendly site that I actually dared to propose it, for which I got into trouble with my group, I can tell you. But, you know, it's been a sad disappointment to me ever since. 62 planning applications later, and there are only 17 mentioned in here, we have something much less satisfactory than what I felt we were going to get the outline. And we are hearing from a developer who's going to be off the site, yes, in perhaps 5 years' time, although I wouldn't bank on it. You know, there's a few hundred houses here that will, I think it'll be 20 to 25 years before David Wilson homes are off this site from the date at which we approved the outline. And yet there's no mention of the fact that the outline was approved before the current local plan, and we will probably have another local plan before there's any start of works in accordance with this application were we to approve it. And there's no mention of those policies that are in the local plan. I don't know whether officers can deal with that point as to why we can't insist on the latest policies and give them at least some weight within an application of this size. And when we had so many questions to officers about one single replacement house, to allow hundreds to go through, and this is quite normal, actually. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, you and I understand pounds, but we don't understand millions of pounds. And, you know, it's just
Okay, right, Councillor Vickers, all your points now are going to be answered by the appropriate officer. So just hold your horses, please, and one by one, you will get appropriate answers.
I think if I'm right, the question is why can't we assess the current application against the current policies? We are assessing this reserve matters application against the current policies in the core strategy, and taking into account the emerging policies in the local plan review. But I have to stress that it is the reserve matters, and matters such as the car club contract and travel plan outline matters, and they were dealt with at the outline planning permission stage and the section 106 that was attached to the outline planning permission. And so we wouldn't be revisiting those decisions in this reserved matters application. I hope that answers the question.
Clarification accepted. It's just a question of, history now. I suppose we should have thought of that at the time.
You also raised points about community facilities as well.
Well, that was probably tied up in the section 106 as well, I think.
Yes, I mean, it's often the case at outline stage, if you want to ensure that community facilities are provided or at least marketed in the first instance to community organisations, then the section 106 would be the vehicle to secure that, much has been in the same way that's been done for the Sandalford development. Unfortunately, the section 106 for this site, when it was signed and approved in 2009 originally, didn't have any requirements or specifications of the local centre. It was merely guided by policy, which has been carried through to the core strategy and simply refers to small retail facilities.
Right, Councillor Hooker, I think. No, Councillor Dick, you asked a question, didn't you? You were going to ask.
I'm not insulted by the mistake there, Chairman. Thank you. So we've heard eloquently from the developer. I suspect that motivation for the slightly different plan is a little bit more cynical than caring for the environment. And naturally, because the cars have been displaced from beneath the blocks, then there's a lot more cars out there in the public, and therefore a lot more green space, which is very regrettable. And I understand why and what the resident is saying. We're hearing that the community centre is a misnomer, always has been. And I'm afraid there's no point in talking about that today. None of this is relevant today. This is the fault of everybody who was involved in this previously. I wasn't, so I am innocent. All I would say is, can we look at the officer and the appropriate officer and say, obviously there's guidance about green space in relation to dwellings. Clearly, if you moved into a development that wasn't complete, then you got a better picture than you were going to get at the end. I understand that, and that's just the way of the world. But are we happy that there is an appropriate play recreation space linked to this latest application? That's the only question I can ask.
Jake, are you appropriate to answer that question?
So in terms of formal play areas, leaps were secured in section 106 and 2 leaps were designated to be provided within the eastern area parcel. Admittedly, the location has changed slightly, but there are 2 local equipped areas of play within the eastern area parcel that have already been provided. There is also informal areas of open space. As mentioned in my presentation, that hasn't been lost. And that is also designated in section 106. So overall, there is no net loss of formal or informal open space. There has been changes over between different reserve matters approvals in the amount of soft landscaping that's being proposed. And I accept that it's slightly less now than a previous reserve matter was, but not sufficient to warrant refusing this application.
Thank you, Chairman. There's some reassurance in there somewhere. Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Any other points? Right, Councillor Amiraj.
Just a couple of questions to case officer. I'll be really quick. We talked about the affordable housing, but I don't think we looked into where those affordable housings are going in these block of apartments. I understand that they're not dotted around. It's mainly blocks A1 and A2. And there is no affordable housing in block G. Can I know the reason why there is no affordable houses dotted across the blocks, just concentrated in only 2 blocks?
So, Chairman, I'll just quickly show my screen as this may share my screen as this may help. So the affordable housing is proposed in Block D, Block C, and part of Block B2 here. Previous reserve matters approvals proposed affordable housing in similar blocks previously. There are difficulties with registered providers managing blocks that are mixed tenure, and often they actually prefer a whole block for management reasons. And in this instance, you've got Block C and Block D that are managed, and you've got part of Block B2, but that also has a suitable sort of separate access, so to speak. This has been assessed by our housing service, and as I mentioned, a very similar affordable housing layout has been previously approved by this council. Both housing service accept it, and the previously approved affordable housing layout is a reasonable fallback position for the applicant.
I mean, from the chair, Councillor, as you well know, and you probably spoke to various other councillors over a period of time, we were a council that were advocating pepper potting in a lot of the developments for a long period of time. But, you know, in certain circumstances, and I think this was a typical example, it wasn't going to be necessarily feasible to undertake it. And you just heard from the officer, the problem is managing the blocks, and it makes it quite difficult. But the general concept of pepper potting was a policy of various administrations over a period of time.
Sorry, Chairman, I necessarily understand your point, but I don't agree with that there's just management issues preventing those affordable homes being pepper potted, because we know that we've been approving applications based on this assumption that the developers would provide these, meet these conditions, but later they come up with this issues around management as the reason to avoid this. I think we should know what are those real management issues, but I don't want to go in the detail, but I'm not fully convinced.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we're obviously now in discussion on the application. So looking around the table for comments or proposals. Councillor Dick.
I'm happy to propose the recommendation from officers as read.
Okay, does that find a seconder?
Yes, Chairman.
Hooker. Okay, Councillor Hooker, sorry, he's beat you to it, Councillor Williston. Okay, conditions, anything that needs to be included? As the proposal, I think you said, didn't you? As read, yeah. Okay. Councillor Amiraj, did you wish to something to be considered that's not?
I definitely would like to propose conditions. I think that's agreeable, I believe. Affordable housing, I understand that's management one, so I'm not going to that, even though disagree with that. Just another condition, we talked about the coach parking. What I'm not convinced is why the access to the coach parking would have to be always through the home straight. Can we put a condition that it avoids the home straight during busy hours or something like that? Because imagine 20, 30 coaches coming into home straight with all these car parks around. It will be chaotic. So can we put around some conditions that access to coach parks are restricted at certain times?
Chairman, I would strongly advise against that, mainly because there is no other access to the coach park. The race day movement was approved at the outline stage, and the routes for coaches, as I mentioned earlier, is on a plan that's an approved plan attached to the outline planning permission. And the principle of having the coaches come through between two of these apartment blocks has already been approved by this council. So there would be insufficient justification to alter that now, and a condition would also be unreasonable as there is no other alternative access to the coach park.
Even under the bridge, I know under the bridge was not tall enough to accommodate, but yeah, I'm laughing at this, but I'm sad that this is all being pointed out to the previous applications, which, like Councillor Rick, I was not part of, so I'm not guilty, but I think this has been a mistake there, because imagine this flats, car parks, children playing around, all coaches coming in and out. It's going to be messy.
I think, you might be considering the other issue, which is probably not relevant totally to this application, and that is loading and offloading, which is a slightly different situation, but that could obviously have an effect on the surrounding residents in other blocks, but I don't think that's for us to consider tonight. Okay. Sorry.
We should be voting on the proposal.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a proposal, we've had a seconder, and no other members actually come forward with any other additions to that proposal. So can I have a show of hands? All in favour, please? Against? Abstention? You abstain? Okay, well, I'll put myself down on that. Okay, so myself. Okay, so right, yeah, okay. Well, thanks very much for attending, and all the representatives as well. I'm sorry to keep you here late at night at 10:10, or no, about 10:15 now. And for members, I think it's Gordon, and it's dealing with the special meeting.
It's in hand with Stephen and Gordon.
Yeah. Well, I think members, if you haven't already notified your availability on the possible dates for this special day planning, please notify. Thank you very much. Please notify the appropriate officer that's trying to coordinate it, because it's important that we do consider some of the backlog of applications that need to be quickly resolved. Okay. Thanks very much.
We hear that Kellis on 5.
Yeah, we are aiming